It's my pleasure to call the State Board of Education meeting back to session. Well, we have the annual report from SEAC, and we have Colleen Riley and Brian Wilson here to present that report. Welcome.
Great, thank you. I'll need to get acclimated to your new positions. Congratulations. My name is Colleen Riley. I'm the director of the Early Childhood Special Education and Title Services team. I also serve as the secretary to SEAC, the Special Education Advisory Council. And today we have Joan Robbins, who is the current SEAC chair, and the rest of the SEAC membership who will introduce themselves, and Brian Wilson, who was last year's SEAC chair, who will provide for you the annual report. So I will turn things over to Joan Robbins to give you a brief overview, and then we will introduce the rest of the membership.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Joan Robbins, and I am the current chair for SEAC. It's an honor and privilege for me to serve in that role. This is my fourth year on SEAC, and I have to say that each year I have learned to appreciate to a greater extent the significance of the role that SEAC plays and the importance of the work that we do with you and with Colleen and the KSDE staff. This might be a refresher for some of you, but I know there is Mr. Porter is new, right? So maybe this is new information for you. But SEAC is composed of about 20 individuals, and we have a very wide range of areas that we represent. We have representatives on SEAC from school districts. We have representatives from higher education. We also have parents of children with exceptionalities, both gifted and children who have disabilities. We have representatives from foster care, the Department of Corrections, homeless children, state agencies, and private schools. I think that the varied representation on SEAC really serves an important purpose in helping us not have tunnel vision and only coming to problem solving from our own points of views. We always have very lively discussions, and I think all points of views are represented very well. Among the matters that we discuss are the unmet needs of children with exceptionalities in Kansas, rules and regulations that are proposed by the state, and the coordination of services. We had a comment this morning at our meeting about how much we see the state really moving to coordinate services even more so than they have in the past, and that we don't stay in our own silos. We look to coordinate services within the agencies, and we're really pleased with the direction things are going. Our meeting agendas are very full, as I know yours are, and we get a great deal of information provided by the staff of KSDE, for whom we really have the greatest respect. We know they're all hardworking and dedicated to the children and the families of people in Kansas. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow at breakfast, 7:30, I believe, room 560. And at this time, I'm going to invite the rest of the SEAC members to come up and introduce themselves. Let's start.
Good afternoon. My name is Marvin Miller. I live in Wichita, and I'm a parent of a child with Down syndrome.
And I'm Kathy Kirstenbrock-Osmeyer. I'm Director of Special Ed at the Northwest Kansas Educational Service Center, and also this year working with Smoky Hill with juvenile corrections out at Lawrence Gardner High School. Also the parent of a child with, he's other health impaired, Tourette syndrome, and a daughter who was in the gifted program at KU now.
My name is Matthew Ramsey. I'm an associate professor at Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas, and I represent related services on the SEAC board.
Hi, I'm Vicki Smith. I'm Assistant Director of Student Services in Auburn-Washburn, and I represent Administration and Special Ed.
Good afternoon. I'm Marcy Aycock. I am a former school administrator here in Kansas. I now work for the National Academy Foundation, support educators and schools all over the Midwest. I am on the board as a parent of a child with giftedness. My son is gifted but also has Asperger's, and so he's an interesting young man. He's 13. I live in Sedgwick near Wichita.
I'm Sean Mackey, and I represent teachers, and I am a special education teacher in the Shawnee Mission District.
Hello, I'm Leslie, and I'm going to try to get all my hats today. I'm the director of the Parent Training Information Center, and that's Families Together, so we're the federally designated and funded PTI for Kansas. So in that role, I talk to parents every day. I'm also the parent of a son who teaches in Jones District. He's a special education teacher in Blue Valley, and I am the guardian of my nephew, who is an adult with dual diagnosis, developmental disabilities and mental health challenges. And I have a granddaughter who has a congenital hearing loss, and so she is served through an IEP as well as through our tiered system. So I have all those hats that I juggle every day. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Deb Hauser, and I'm the Executive Director of Special Services for Manhattan-Ogden School District, and I represent a local education official.
Good afternoon. I'm Joan Macy, and I work at the Kansas School for the Deaf, and I represent state agencies on SEAC. Good afternoon. I'm Barb Kempf. I am the Permanency Director for KBC Behavioral Healthcare in our KC Metro area, and I am representing foster care. I am also a parent of a special education student.
Good afternoon. My name is Stacy Clarkson. I'm the Director of Special Education at Greenbush. I'm representing adult learners in the Department of Corrections that have special needs. I'm also a parent of a child with a disability.
Good afternoon. My name is Judy Martin, and I am the Director of Special Education and Federal Programs for the Gardner-Edgerton School District, and I represent homeless children.
Hello, I'm Karen Crow. I'm the Associate Superintendent for the Archdiocese of Kansas City and Kansas Catholic Schools, and I represent private schools.
Good afternoon. I am Brian Wilson. I represent local education officials. I'm the Executive Coordinator for Student Support Services in Wichita Public Schools. And I want to invite you an opportunity to go back and look at what we've accomplished over this last year. As former co-chair, it was an honor to provide my opportunities and energies and to be in chair last year. And kind of want to go through, I know on pages 9 through 12 in your annual report that you have, they'll go through and provide you a great amount of detail. What I want to do is just kind of hit the highlights and make sure we go through there. And again, I really want to talk about the fact that I know this is a volunteer board and you guys spend lots of hours and lots of time in that. And I really want to talk about the fact that SEAC in and of itself is a wonderful group, very dedicated, very efficient and effective. We do meet, we're supposed to meet 4 times a year. We actually do meet more than that. We meet 5 times a year. And in rare circumstances, we have to have emergency meetings. And sometimes those are phone conversations, so we do spend a great amount of time doing that. And really the sustained persistence and grace and direction from Colleen Riley and the Early Childhood Special Ed title team is really invaluable. One of the major components that we, again, spent over last year is providing feedback to KSDE and the Early Childhood Special Ed title team on technical assistance provided to the field. Again, we recognize that there's adults that need additional training and learning. The KSD team has been quick to respond and provide technical assistance where it's needed, and we provided great feedback on that. Tertiary behavior supports we spent a lot of time on. We put 3 major action items, recommended 3 major action items for the board to look at with regard to addition of law enforcement and the exclusion of ESI there. The addition on the appeals process, and not only that, but the definition of parent when it comes to the tertiary behavior supports. And again, the increased needs across the state for training, support, definition, and overall accountability in that area. We've established ongoing support and dialogue about mentoring across the state of Kansas for special ed teachers and resource providers. We've also had a great amount of discussion with regard to licensure and what licensure looks like in the state of Kansas for our special educators and related service providers. And again, there's always the ongoing and ever-ending and sustained dialogue and discussion regarding fiscal accountability that we have to pay attention to and monitor. And those are the main highlights of what you'll find, and again, pages 9 through 12. And if you're curious, on page 8, there's a list of the meetings that we held last year. I believe we had 6 meetings. One of those a phone conference meeting in support of ESI advocacy and recommendation. So at this time, I'd invite if there's any questions regarding.
Steve Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sure from your perspective that you're very efficient. And I think there are people across the street who maybe question once in a while just how efficient you might be. So in our political positions here, we have to listen to all the voices. I'm sure you can appreciate that. Might there be an opportunity for some coalescing of services? Is there any duplication? Is there any part that you're frustrated with that said, well, I wish we could combine these, or something we could make your life simpler and easier? Are there any avenues we could pursue?
Well, me personally, I know Colleen and her position, getting it from all the stakeholders. I have a limited
Brian,
perception
can you
of
speak
that.
into the microphone?
Oh, I apologize.
Thank you.
Limited perception on that, considering my day-to-day and where I work. So,
The topic of efficiency hasn't been one that we've talked about specifically at SEAC. Our team has talked about the different services that we are integrating across the state, but we could certainly make it an agenda item for future SEAC meetings if that were the desire of the board.
Sally Cobble.
Thank you. Appreciate the work that you do for us, all of you. I rely on you, and I try to listen to you. I know that on the federal level, things are kind of moving along on reauthorization of some things. I don't know where the reauthorization on the federal level is for IDEA. And I wondered if you could just comment, and has this group, is that on their agenda at any time to make sure that they're giving advice from Kansas for that reauthorization?
Thank you for that question. We had an ESEA flexibility update this morning, and Sandy Guidry gave us an update of where we are in Kansas with implementing the waiver and what we're going to do as far as updating the waiver. And we feel that we have a lot of good things in place so that when ESEA is reauthorized, Kansas will be ready to implement whatever changes there will be. But as far as reauthorization of IDEA, that occurs after ESEA is reauthorized, and we are quite vocal from our perspective in Kansas in providing input to the Department of Education. So when that opportunity comes, this will be one of the stakeholder groups that definitely is asked for to provide input. In the last reauthorization, separate calls were set up for special education advisory councils across the country to provide input, not just to the SEA like us, but directly to the Department of Ed. So I would assume that that would happen again.
I know that Arnie Duncan came out with his revision of what he thought the revision should be for the Secondary Act. And I didn't know if you've had a chance to look at that, because it just came out, I think, yesterday, whether you've had a chance to look at that to see if there was any conflicts in that or anything that we need to have a heads up on.
I haven't had a chance to look at that, but at this group and my role in supervising and overseeing all federal programs basically is to make sure that the student groups that we are most concerned about, particularly students with disabilities, are included in every aspect as they are right now, and that appropriate supports and services are provided for those students so that they can have an appropriate education, not be discriminated against. Mm-hmm.
Kathy Bush.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking to not only the 2015 legislative session, but the 15-16 school year, what do you see looking ahead in your crystal ball, which, you know, I'm sure you guys all have a great one. What do you see some focus areas that SEAC is going to be working on as you look into kind of next steps?
You guys want to Well, based on our current discussions, it's continuing to look at early intervention programs for students who are in the preschool, early childhood, early grades, in particular with an emphasis in behavior. As SEAC has heard and our data at KSDE suggest, there are more instances of students coming to school where they need behavior interventions put into place so that they can successfully be in school. And so we do see a greater emphasis on that, continued emphasis on that. The conversations about ESEA and just as the questions you guys have asked here today will continue to be on our radar screen. Making sure that all areas of exceptionality continue to be supported and funded appropriately. Fiscal accountability has been an area of increased emphasis the last couple of years. I don't see that changing at all. And even your question about efficiency, it goes to where are the funds coming from, how are the funds being used and distributed, and being accountable at every level for those funds. But then are we being most efficient with the use of those funds? And what does efficient mean in the school context when you're talking about individual students who are eligible for an individual entitlement of IDEA? So I think there's some increased challenges with that conversation for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Tina Horst.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we've looked at some changes with certification licensure of teachers for in the special ed area. How is that affecting you at this point? Do you look at it as being something down the road that you will benefit from? Just kind of tell us where you're at on that particular issue.
That's another great question because, as you know, this has been an area of concern. We have students with great needs, but we don't have enough qualified teachers. On the question of licensure, our team works directly with the teacher education and licensure team on the requirements for licensure. We also have ongoing conversations with those in the universities as far as what the program components are. And then we work with districts and their staff to be able to hire qualified and then be able to retain those staff. The biggest role that our team fulfills right now is providing professional learning for staff. Because we don't hire staff and we don't fire staff, but we can provide statewide professional learning for districts to access for their staff, because we want to ensure that there is quality instruction for the most vulnerable students in our state. I think that when you look at the typical teacher who is a special education teacher, it's a tough job. There are increased demands every day, and the skill set is high. There's a high need right there, and we don't have enough teachers right now to meet the need. So working with districts to be able to put people into those positions that can at least be trained and work well with the students as well as parents in those settings is very important. But it's going to continue to be a concern. Mm-hmm.
Carolyn Campbell.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I do appreciate all of your commitment to your children, our children. And I was reading your priorities, and one is to promote your role to the legislature and to other advisory councils. And so I would just like to encourage you, because we as a board, we're really working hard to do a better job of communicating with our legislative body. And so for each of you, I would just like to ask that make sure that your representative, your senator, that you maybe contact them through this legislative session and establish a personal contact, and just to help all of us and with our children. Thank you.
Ken Willard.
Almost said thank you, Madam Chair. I'm so used to doing that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll pay for that later.
Yes.
As you know, there is a situation out in my part of the state, I'm sure you're aware, where, with a behavior disordered student, and there's a big brouhaha going on about that. I'm just wondering how much of your conversation, or have you worked through that issue of not only providing guaranteeing an education for this behavior disordered student, but guaranteeing a free and appropriate education for the students that are disrupted. And I don't know if the situation has not been handled properly or what, but is that a part of your conversation? Do you have guidance for schools in handling those kinds of things, or can you speak about that?
We did talk briefly about the situation that is occurring at our SEAC meeting this morning, and there are always situations where not all parties involved will agree on how things need to be handled. Our team is working with the school and district team, and as you articulated and are very well aware of, every student in that district has a right to a public education. What it comes down to is the details of that, and I hate to see something like this be played out into the public because then other perceptions are brought into the conversation that may not be appropriate for the context of this situation. But most of all, I think we all need to keep in mind that every student is important. Every student needs to be educated in Kansas, and it's unfortunate when we take it to the masses, but I'm confident that the situation will be resolved. It's just a matter of how and when. But then again, not every situation has a resolution that all parties are happy with.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure of that, but I just wanted to be certain that that's the kind of thing that you're working through, and you have some sort of framework or protocol for handling those kinds of situations, because this one's gotten pretty far out.
We do have a protocol, and we have been working through it, but not every situation is also includes the media, and that is sometimes what makes things even more challenging.
Well, I don't know how well your assistance, how well known it is, because I received calls on this, as you would imagine, and I asked if there'd been any communication or if they knew about SEAC or if there'd been any, and there had not been. So I don't know what you need to do about that or if there's anything you need to do, but it would have been good probably if they could have gotten some advice about how to proceed. And I don't know. I think that's enough. I just want to bring that to your attention. And if you I would be happy to know a little bit about the guidance that's been given or is given in those types of situations, and it would help me maybe to answer some questions sometimes without just acting like I don't know.
certainly.
Yeah.
And you're welcome to call me or email me, and we can
Yeah.
talk further, too.
Okay.
Jim Porter.
Thank you, sir. I see some things coming down the road that are a concern to me is in relation to keeping the qualified person in the classroom, and part of that is working after retirement. In my part of the country, we have several people that are working after retirement, and they're coming back, and there's always the possibility that legislation is going to make that difficult or more expensive for school districts. Do you see that as an issue? And what sort of impact would that have if those people that are currently working after retirement are no longer able to do that?
Well, I think, again, that would challenge the pool. I mean, it definitely lessens the pool of qualified candidates, and I would like to see districts remain in a position of being able to hire the most qualified person that they see fit for a position. Whether that person has already served in public education for 30 years or not shouldn't be, in my opinion, the barometer check of that. I think districts should be able to hire and retain quality staff as they see fit.
Well, I appreciate your answer, especially since I agree with you.
Any other questions? Colleen, to you and to SEAC, and especially to SEAC at this particular moment, on behalf of the board and the state of Kansas, I want to thank you for your dedication and commitment. You know, it's time out of your busy and very important work that you do in your districts, communities. So thank you for taking the time to be advising us and helping us and helping the Department of Education meet its challenge in serving the needs of all students. I do have one question, though. Is SEAC, do you have any vacancies on on the board, SEAC?
Every year we do have vacancies, and we send out a notice of those vacancies usually in April and May.
Okay.
So we had a resignation after Christmas, and so that is one vacancy that will definitely be part of that posting, and we're looking at possible others. And then we have each year a third of our SEAC goes off, and 2/3 remain, so we'll have those openings as well.
Well, thank you. I think we all look forward to the breakfast in the morning and extending this conversation and getting to know each other better.
Okay.
Thank you very
See you
much.
tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda deals with the application of Marysville for approval as an innovative district. Superintendent Mullins is here to provide us information about their application, and Dina and I are here to provide you information and follow up afterwards. Superintendent Mullins, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to share with you the application from USD 364 in Marysville. I've taken our 10-page application and tried to summarize it in a one-page document for you, just highlighting some of the elements of that. So here are just some of where we started with concerns. I am a first-year superintendent at Marysville, started and was hired about this time last year. Started working with the board throughout the month of February, March, April. Started actual work on July 1. Here are some of the concerns that really came up from our district. ACT scores have been an issue in the district. It was a big component of the last school board election, whereas there was some concern about our scores falling below the state average. One of the things that I found when I entered the district in July is we have some issues around our curriculum. We have some issues around our professional learning in the district. They seem to lack focus, and we wanted to try to address that. Families in outlying areas are choosing to go to other districts. One of the interesting things about Marysville, we have Landau Manufacturing, international company, but we have people from 50 different zip codes that drive to Marysville every day to work. That was just kind of an astonishing number to me that we're pulling from that large of a population base. College persistent rates for our students are not where we want them to be. They are above the state average, but we think that they need to be higher. That is a concern. And one of the things that really hit to me right off the bat as I started to know some of the students, we have a lot of graduates who are changing their plans in that summer after they graduate before they ever go to college in the fall. And so I'm really concerned about how good of a job are we doing to prepare those students for the next step if they're making changes in their plans in June and July. All right, big concern for me. So some of the support for our application, like I said, I was hired toward the end of January. The board members started having conversation with me in February and March about becoming a district of innovation. When I got my administrative team together in August, that was part of our conversation from the very beginning, is this something we want to pursue, and what might it look like if we chose to do that? So my administrative team and I have been talking about it since August. In the month of September, I assembled a Superintendent's Council of Excellence, which I had 2 different committees. I pulled one together of our staff members, and then I pulled together a committee of our community members. And the conversation started in September around what do we want our ideal high school graduate to look like, and then how can we work together to get there. If you look at the section for why did we apply, these are some things that we thought were very important. We feel like our children, grandchildren in Marysville deserve the best possible education system that we can provide for them, and we want to really work toward that lifelong success. As I said originally, we feel there needs to be change in our district. Like I said, curriculum is lacking in focus. Professional learning is lacking in focus. And we also know that change is very difficult, and it can be a lonely proposition. I've spent probably 5 of the last 10 years of my career working with low-performing schools in other states, and it's a very, very difficult process. And we wanted to be able to join a coalition, join a group of like-minded schools to work together to make sure that we can make Marysville as good as possible. Again, we want to become a more attractive school for the folks that are already working in our community but are choosing to live somewhere else. We want to try to attract them to our community and be able to attract good employees as well. Last 2 things there, we want to be around the schools that have similar goals and similar vision, and we want to learn from those schools. And then we want to take that and then apply it out, and we want to impact schools in our region, trying to make those as good as we can. So the next section there on the 1-page handout talks about the exemptions that specifically we were seeking in our application. The first thing there is we modeled a lot of our application after Concordia. So we're asking for a lot of the exemptions that they're receiving. We would like those to apply to our district as well. The next piece there is relief from the 60-day requirement for teacher evaluations for the new teachers. And here's the reasoning behind that. If you look back at the law, the original law of teacher evaluation was written, I think, in 1972, revised in about 2006. Here within the last 2 or 3 years, 2011, 12, we have all these new evaluation systems that have come online. And they are so much more intense. They take so much more time, they're more labor intensive, and they're a really different kind of instrument than what we've had previously. My administrators who are on the ground working with this every day, working with those evaluations, they are struggling to get that all accomplished within that first 60-day window. So we're looking for some relief from that so that we can have good conversation and really use these evaluation tools to the fullest extent rather than trying to rush through to get to a certain artificial deadline. So we're looking for some relief from that. The next piece there is one that we know through applied credit, it also applies here, but we're really looking at the ability to offer award specific course credit for internships and mentoring programs. We think it's a little bit different than the applied credit possibly, so that's why we've left it in here as an exemption. It's something we're still trying to work through. But for instance, like I said, Landau, we got people coming from many, many zip codes to come work. They're having trouble finding people who live in Marysville that are qualified to work in the factory. but they could really work with us to offer a blueprint reading course or some things that would help our kids become better employees, but it would also benefit them as an employer in the district. So we're looking at how can we partner with some of our local businesses to offer some courses that benefit our kids, but then in turn around would benefit the community as well. So we want to keep that out there. The last exemption that we're seeking that's a little bit different is our district has made a commitment to the ACT Aspire series of assessments. And that begins in grades 3, goes all the way through early high school, which would be grades 9 and 10. We are testing every child, both formatively and summatively, using the ACT Aspire series of assessments. We would like that to be our primary focus in our district. That's something that Brad, as we've been talking about, is how can we merge that in, and how can we make that work? We know there's some federal requirements that prevent us from opting out of it completely, but we want to investigate using that as our primary focus. Other components of the plan there at the very bottom that I just want to share with you, these are things that we think are important. They're not really exemptions, they're local decisions that we would need to make. But we are looking at changing our graduation requirements. Currently, we have 2 different tracks. We would like to eliminate that and go to 1 track. We're looking at increasing our requirements for English language arts and mathematics. When we look at our data, the 2 areas where we have most of our students that have to take remedial coursework, it's math and English. So we feel like if that's where our kids are having to take remedial work, then we need to increase our requirements at the high school level. Beyond that, we are going to have a testing requirement. We are asking that all students, as part of the graduation requirement, they take, in our words, we called it successfully take 2 of 5 different exams. Okay, so we've given them a menu of 5 different options, and we've asked them to successfully take that. And what we mean by successfully take is take the exam, do their absolute best on it, and then work with the counselor and work with the teachers to analyze the data to use it to make decisions. We're not wanting to put a minimum score for the kids to take because they're not all going to meet that same minimum score. But we're just asking them to do their very best and then use that data to make some decisions. The last thing that we're asking for there is to develop a college and career readiness requirement as part of graduation. So we're giving them 5 different options about how they could demonstrate that they're ready for college or career. And those are listed there. Some of them are a combination of CTE credits and college credits. Some of those are earning that industry recognized certificate. Some of that is involved maybe completing a 2-year program of study at Highland Community College, which is our local piece. But ultimately what we're talking about is them having to demonstrate to us in some way that they're prepared for college or career before they graduate. So that's the essence of our application, and I would open up for any questions.
Dina, do you have any comments or added information?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Kathy Bush?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I appreciate your application. Obviously spent quite a bit of time on this. Your one exemption that is relief from the 60-day requirement, I see where it looks like you're going to use McREL.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about the timeline that the McREL system has and share with us a little bit about that.
Okay. The first thing that starts out the start of every year, so let's take, we're going to bring in a brand new teacher, okay? Their first element is to complete a self-assessment, all right? So they're going to complete that self-assessment. They're going to meet with the administrator in order to go over that self-assessment. And then they go in and they go through a process of developing a professional development plan. So they identify what are their areas that they want to grow in, what are some of the indicators that are going to be for that to take place, all right? So there's a conversation between the administrator and the teacher, you know, looking at that professional growth plan, okay? Then from there, there's a period of time that's going to take place. Then there is a kind of like very similar to the old regular teacher evaluation. There's some pre-observation, there's some observation, there's some post-observation. The biggest difference is the focus of McREL the focus of KEEP, the focus of these others is on helping those teachers grow. Okay? It's not so much on, that one snapshot. All right? So where we're feeling like we have to, where we need the more time is to have those ongoing professional conversations. That first 60 days, if we're taking that brand new teacher that's fresh out of there, so they've done the self-assessment, they've done the professional growth plan, we've given them some time to get their feet on the ground, we've done the pre-observation, we've done the observation, we've done the post-observation conference. There's not a very big window of time in there for us to focus on growing that teacher. Okay? And really what should happen is once that observation is finished, then there's some self-reflection again and some talking about that assessment. Okay? So we just, like I said, we just feel like that 60-day window, it really crunches that time frame down, and we're not focusing as much on the growth of the teacher as we would like to.
Okay. So it really allows you to implement the McGrail system to a better extent without being so time crunched.
It's close. It's very much. It would allow us to be closer to the intent of the system instead of trying to meet a deadline.
Okay, that helps clarify. Thank you.
Okay.
Does McCrell have deadlines?
No. Other than you've got to
get it done.
You've got to get it done.
Sounds like there's a deadline. This is not a waiver from doing it. It's just utilizing time in a more directed manner than a confined manner.
Right. It's just allowing us to really allow the process to work to its fullest extent.
Carolyn Campbell?
Thank you, sir, for this application. In looking over, maybe my question is really for our attorney, or since this is a state statute, they can't get around that without changing the statute, or does the innovative school districts can do that?
Yes. Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, the innovative district statute, it lists certain statutes that the districts have to follow, but then it says they're exempt from all other ones. So that statute in and of itself gives them the authority, because it's not the board that could exempt a statute, but the statute itself said you don't have to follow these others. And I don't believe this one was one of the required ones for them. So.
Okay, I have another question with that. So you say 60 days is too soon. Do you have a suggestion with 90 days? What would be your alternative?
If you talk to the folks at McCrail, they wouldn't give you a deadline. They would want you to do one of these through the course of 1 year. Okay, that's what I think the McCrail folks would tell you, is to let the process work. It would be over the course of 1 year. For us, we're thinking the 90 to 100 days would allow us the freedom to get done what we need to get done without rushing the process.
So I can understand this. So you're saying that McCrail would say we could go a whole year without evaluating a new teacher?
They would say that their process is designed to be a 1 year process.
So that
okay? And it wouldn't be something that you wouldn't, I mean, obviously, I would instruct my administrators to be in there doing lots of observations along the way. Our focus needs to be on growing teachers, helping them grow in the profession. Okay, so I would not exempt them from being in those classrooms, participating in observations within those first few days.
Thank you.
The intent of the original law was that first-year teachers or probationary teachers would receive immediate feedback as opposed to not getting it done.
Exactly.
And I'm not going to apologize, but I'm just going to say the situation that you describe of having a deadline of 60 days isn't really arbitrary. And when you consider it, it's like 2 months after they've started. And if a teacher hasn't received input very quickly, even before the 2 months, the 60 days, if you're just meeting the deadline of the 60 days to be compliant, you're not meeting the spirit of the law to improve and effective teaching.
Exactly.
Regrettably, I hate to say that I know people, but I know people, if they didn't have the 60-day rule, wouldn't get it done.
I understand that completely.
What a revelation that is. So, in terms of the innovative district, for what Marysville is trying to accomplish here, is to meet the requirements of McCrell and what they're trying to do, but not avoiding the deadline, but intensifying the experience that they have. They're not trying to get out of the process, and sometimes it comes across that way. Because it really is important. If you're not giving new teachers, even in the first week, they're eager at that point for feedback. Many years later, they're not as eager. So it's really important. If you lose them in the first 60 days. First semester, if they're not getting support, you're going to lose them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes you run into a situation where you have a large number of those beginning teachers that you're working through that process.
How many teachers do you have in your high school, or how many teachers per administrator do they have to review?
30.
30?
35, somewhere in that neighborhood.
One administrator to 30?
Roughly.
That's pretty good. We've got districts with a lot bigger numbers than that. Okay. Dean Horst.
Thank you. Well, I think the key to this really is that it isn't that new teachers aren't receiving some feedback. It's that it's not formal feedback. And I think that growth process is an informal type of feedback instead of having to sign papers and put it in your file and all of those sorts of things. So it's more of a collegial type conversation between an administrator and the teacher, as I understand.
Absolutely.
What you're expressing a need to do.
Right.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Sally Cobble.
Thank you, Jim. I think we've had enough questions about the teacher thing, so I'm going to jump on. I too think it's important for a new year teacher right away to know, to be assessed, but you've got to give them time to grow. And I understand that part, as long as you're not trying to do away with. And do you have a mentoring program there for your new teachers?
We do. It's not as formal as I would like it to be.
Okay. Because the one thing we have found out is new teachers need that mentoring in the first year.
Absolutely.
And to retain. And so my concern on the waiver is the assessment, the state assessment. I'm not sure we can do that. I'm not so sure we wouldn't have to ask the federal government on that. I'm not sure that I agree with providing the waiver for middle school. I would provide the waiver. Well, you don't need a waiver for it now in the high school level. My basic theory is that with the standards that we have set and with the teaching tool evaluation that we came up with, we're going to see a growth in those ACT scores anyway, because they're going to be aligned with all of those other things. I'm having a little trouble with that one, personally, and I'm only 1 out of 10. The others I don't have a bit of trouble with. And Jim, I'd like for you or Brad to go through on how we would obtain this waiver, because we have been turned down in the last year allowing this before when we have filed, and the federal government has has turned us down already in the last year on that. Did you
And
know
you're
that?
exactly right.
Okay.
These are the things that they asked for, and quite frankly, there are some things that we can't grant. We don't have the authority to do that. And even if we had the authority last year, I don't think we have the authority right now because of the whole ESA being in flux. You know, and we had this very same discussion at the Council of Innovative Schools, and we realize as a council and individuals that that's just something that's not available to us to do. Thank you. It's a good point.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Somewhere in all the evaluation things that we have been approving, I miss the 60-day thing. I guess I thought that the teacher would be the self-evaluation and then develop the professional what they thought. But to expect them to show growth in 60 days, I never thought was our intent.
No.
And so do we have that verbiage somewhere that we need to go back and relook at that and get that changed? Because I don't think anybody should have to do the
60 days is not in McCrell, it's not in KEEP, it's not in any of them. It's something that's in statute. It's state law that says a teacher will be evaluated twice in their first 2 years or 3 years, but it's statute that just lays out the timeline that they have to be evaluated. But KEEP, McCrell, all of those are just evaluation instruments.
Okay, this brings me, Mr. Chairman, may I? Yes. This brings me back to the discussion, and you all know how I feel about the innovative districts. But my biggest fear about an innovative district, on these innovative districts and the way we've got them set up, is that we're going to end up running parallel systems. And if we really think that we don't like this 60 days, I don't want every district in the state to feel like they have to become an innovative district for us to waive the 60 days. And so, because there's a lot of districts that might like that waived, that have a good, that are following their plan, but they're not going to qualify for what those other districts that have to be, all those other additional things. So I guess that's what I do not want us having to happen.
I would agree with you 100% that we don't want to create a parallel universe. That if this is good for Marysville and the innovative districts, then we need to go to the legislature and say we need to modify the law. That it is not, it's either works in these innovative districts, and if it works, then I think it behooves us to bring it forward as legislation for everyone.
But I also don't think other districts, let's say Liberal wants to do that, and that's all they want exempt is those 60 days. But I don't think they ought to have to become part of an innovative district for us to waive that. That's what I'm trying to get across.
Good point. And I'd agree with that.
Okay.
Dina Horst?
You basically stated what I was going to state, that the innovative districts are intended to try things. They're like a pilot. And once we see whether that works, then we can go to the legislature and say, hey, you need to revise, get rid of that statement. The other component that you're talking about, it's possible for districts right now to come to us and ask for a waiver. So if they chose to ask for that one waiver, I'm sure that we would probably agree to do so if they could present a good case. And also just a statement that I don't think any of the innovative districts lack understanding in the fact that the ACT Aspire is something that has to be approved as a waiver by the federal government, not us. We can say we agree with them, but in the end, they can't use it until it's been waived by the federal government. And I think they all understand that. Am I
Absolutely.
correct?
And at this point,
But
the ACT
if you
Aspire
don't
is
put
a
it
local
in
decision.
here, then nobody knows you want waived from it. So, anyway.
Ken Willard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mullins, the statement about the exemption ability to use the ACT Aspire instead of the state assessment as your primary assessment program, that doesn't mean that you're not still taking the state assessment.
Correct.
But you're using the ACT Aspire because it better aligns with what kids need to, where they need to be in order to get into college, right?
At this point, my staff and my parents are buying the results of the ACT Aspire.
Right.
They're buying into those results. So what we're anticipating is that we'll have two parallel sets of data here.
I understand.
Okay.
That's what
and then we'll look at that data and we may determine 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the road that we don't need both of those data sources.
Right.
Okay. And then we'll evaluate from there. But at this point, we're making a local decision to move forward with ACT Aspire alongside the state assessment program. Okay.
So if you were killing the state assessments, it still would not tell you whether your kids really were ready for college or a career, correct?
Say that again.
If your kids were just knocking the top off the state assessments, it still would not be a good a measure that would be useful to you in knowing whether your kids are ready for college.
At this point, I think we need more than one data measurement to tell us that.
Okay.
And right now, we want to use the ACT Aspire as a second data point.
Okay. I had a question about, you're talking about increasing requirements for English language arts and mathematics. Can you tell me what that looks like? What your requirements are now?
Okay. Currently, in our district, we have a student could graduate with, if you think of just English classes, okay, they could take 3.5 English classes for the students that are in our technical track. Those are in our college prep track are taking 4 years of English. In math, it's 3 years is the requirement. Okay. What we're looking at in both of those situations is upping that to 4. Okay, so that our senior, those kids who are seniors, we want to put them through a 4 year of senior English, and we want to put them through a 4 year of math as a senior. And again, that's coming directly from, if we analyze our data, the classes that our students are having to take remedial coursework in when they go to college is English and math. Those are the two areas. They're not having trouble going and not persisting at the college because of what's happening in their science and social studies classes. It's what's happening in English and math. So we feel like if the data is telling us that that's where our deficiencies are for our graduates, that we need to up our requirements there at the local level.
So the requirements would be increased for every student regardless of what their planned track was after school?
Yes, because in a lot of cases what we find is those kids will change their mind 1 or 2 years down the road, and we want them to be prepared to be successful in both places. Whether they choose to go to a trade school for a while and then switch to go to a college, we want them to be successful in that environment. Okay. Now, does that mean that every senior is going to get the same math class and the same English class? No. We're still working through that, but we just feel like we need to up the requirements if the data is telling us that this is what they're not prepared for.
Okay. Do you have individual learning plans for students?
Yes.
Okay, so regardless of what their individual learning plan is, they would still be required to have 4 years of math and 4 of English.
We think that's necessary.
I see. On the testing requirements, you said they're required to successfully complete 2 of 5. What are the 5?
Okay, the 5 that we're looking at right now, ACT is one, ACT work keys is another, the ASVAB, One of them would be the Compass/Asset series of testing, which a lot of junior colleges use. And the last one would be the CPAS, which is the state version for the CTE courses. So those are the 5 options that they would have available to them.
Okay. Would I'm just curious, is if you had a student who was getting a lot of experience outside the classroom in public speaking or in writing or whatever, the kinds of things that would be in an English course, can they get credit for that outside of the classroom, or we're talking about just classroom time they have to have regardless of what else is going on in their life?
We're looking at how we can use those other things in their life to help do that. Yes.
Okay, that's encouraging to me, because I'm probably wrong, and I reserve the right to do that, but I'm just not sure that all that much is accomplished by guaranteeing that everybody has the same number of years of class time in English and math. And I'm not criticizing your goal and trying to get there, but I'm just wanting to make sure that for all students this is wide open as possible, so they have other opportunities to prove their proficiency rather than just sitting in a classroom.
Right.
I just met a student in this past week who was doing remarkable things outside the classroom, but still required to meet all those classroom requirements, which were really meaningless to this student, and not in your school district, but elsewhere. So I think that just tells us that we need to kind of relook at that whole thing. And graduation requirements mean different things for different students. And
right.
Yeah. So, okay. Thank you very much.
Sally Collum.
Okay, I'm sorry. After he spoke and you answered him, now I'm confused.
Okay.
Okay, on here, you're asking to use ACT instead of state assessments. So I was assuming you weren't going to take state assessments.
In a perfect world, if we could get everything we asked for, that's what we would ask for. But we know that's not possible. Okay, so we know in the interim we are going to be giving both the state assessments and the ACT Aspire side by side. Okay.
Well, and I was going to say, state assessments, and then you need 2 others anyway. And if you want to use ACT, just knock yourself out.
Right.
I was having trouble with the word instead.
Okay, and that was in our original application. We did ask for that we asked for it to be used instead, but in talking with Brad and the other folks with the Coalition of Districts, we know that's not possible at this time.
Okay. I'm really going to be interested to find out the results on what Ken was talking about, students getting some credit for their work outside the school, because what we want them to do is be able to get a job, hold it down, and be good in that.
Absolutely.
And some of the best education you get is on-the-job training. And I'm going to be interested to see. I think where I am, I have more students now working outside of the school than when I was on the local school board. And they're helping money on the table in doing that, and they're getting some really good education. And I think it's one thing that we might need to be flexible about. And I'm going to really be interested in those results.
And that's really where, when I talk about the internships and mentoring, that's really
I'm really interested on how some of that is coming out and how your educators feel that goes along with the standards that we've set. Are our standards right? We say we switched to those standards because the workforce wanted us to, and these are what they thought they needed. Well, this is going to be a good way of seeing if that is true. And so, thank you very much.
Mr. Mullins, thank you very much for your presentation. I will say that this is a receive item only today, that next month we'll be having this as an action item. I would also tell you that the presentation that Superintendent Mullins and his board members, students, and teachers made at our coalition meeting was very good. And I guess, not to prolong this, but to say that there are things that we can waive, things we can't waive, and things that we can test out and stretch a little bit in terms of trying to affect positive and structured change, for schools as they move forward. So Marysville has a great application, great leadership, and your short time that you've been there, you've certainly got everybody on board and focused of the future, so congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item on our agenda is the update on K-12 accreditation process. Scott is here. And
I'm getting this set up. Kelly has a PowerPoint for you guys all to look at, to follow along.
Okay, so Scott Myers and Bill Bagsua, and Kelly's handing out the important stuff.
That's right. And good afternoon. It is my pleasure to be here before you again to provide you with an update on the good works taking place around the envisioned PK-12 accreditation system. I'm going to have to get used to people sitting in different spots, though, so it's going to throw me for a little bit of a loop. I have with me today Kelly Slayton is the lead educational program consultant working with accreditation, and Mr. Bill Bagshaw, the assistant director of teacher licensure and accreditation, heading up the accreditation work as well. After some preliminary comments by myself, I'll be turning this over to Kelly, who will be walking you through the remainder of the presentation. The reason we're here today is, as you well know, this is a fairly fundamental shift in the approach to accreditation for public schools or all accredited schools in the state of Kansas. So we believe it's important to provide you with ongoing updates of the work that takes place in the field with our QPA Advisory Council, and then, of course, the work that's taking place within the closed confines of KSDE. So with that, we'll begin. The first slide here is by way of reminding you of the work that's been taking place already and the ideas and the recommendations that have been put in the can, if you will, by the QPA Advisory Council, and as we've gone out and talked across the state to a variety of stakeholders. These include moving to the district level accreditation model, moving away from the individual building model, the 5 R's themselves, the rubrics under the 5 R's, under 4 of the R's, utilizing the components within the College of Career Ready, making sure that the work is extremely transparent at the district level, the building level, as far as we can get it down to so the public knows exactly what's going on. The use of outside validation teams to come along and to make sure that the work taking place is as it's being presented, critical friend, if you will. And then that this is set up on a 5-year cycle, not just the 1-year cycle as it was previously. As we've moved more and more into this, what we've discovered is the system that we are working with and working toward fairly closely mirrors the higher ed accreditation system. There are several parallels as we go through this. The whole idea of a systems approach, the multiple year approach, the outside validation team, all of those are being done in the other side of our greater educational community at the higher ed level. So it's not just us here in PK-12 looking at it. Today, Kelly will walk you through the various requirements as we see it at this moment, the actual process, because we do know there have been questions of, well, this is all fine and dandy, but how does it work? And so we're going to share with you the good thinking at this point of the multiple year approach and what happens in year 1, what happens in year 2. And so as we put this out to the field, when we work with the building principals and we work with the district leadership were able to say, well, in year 3, here's the work that should be taking place all the way through the entire system. And then we'll end up with what's next. We have a QPA Advisory Council meeting coming up here in February. It wasn't originally scheduled, but we had our last meeting a couple months back in Wichita, and from the work from that meeting, it just led us to believe we needed to accelerate our work and have more meetings with that QPA Advisory Council. And so we've added in a meeting to take place here in February. And I'm sure Kelly will discuss the ins and outs of what that pertains when that comes. So with that, it really is my true pleasure to introduce you Kelly Slayton. Kelly's been with us for, 6 months, seems like 3 years, the amount of work that she does, which that's how long I've been around, so that's forever. And Kelly will walk you through the remainder of the presentation. And of course, we stand for any and all questions as we move through this. Okay. Go.
Good afternoon. As Scott pointed out on the first content slide, the Advisory Council recommendations, I just wanted to let you know that the bolding and the different colors that are on that slide indicate the decisions or recommendations that have been formally made by the Advisory Council this year. So as Scott said, we have definitely ramped up the work that the Advisory Council is doing this year. And because of that, because of really pushing up those the work and the deadlines that the council has imposed upon itself, so that we can get more answers out more quickly. You have the slides in front of you, so I'm definitely not going to read them to you, but I will try to just explain their meeting and get through them very quickly so that there's plenty of time at the end for your questions. And really, most of these, aside from the ones that have been formally recommended by the council, a lot of this is represents what we're looking at, what we're talking about here at KSDE, and then what we will be bringing to the council to discuss and revise and then come up with a formal recommendation. I'll make sure I click when I need to click here. The quality criteria that have been in place with the QPA system for 20 years, I don't know, long time. It's really important, I think, to note that those are not going away. They are pretty much going to be embedded in the new system, and kind of an expectation to begin with that the schools and districts have all of this stuff already. You know, I mean, pretty much they do anyway, because they've been trying to meet these requirements for a long time. So everything that's checkmarked on this slide represents a quality criterion that is present in the new model, the proposed model. So those, we would expect that districts would have those in place to begin with. The new model requirements include stakeholder participation, evidence of college and career readiness, the goal areas, which is the framework, the 5 R's, and so on. What I'd really like to point out are the green, the items in green, because those are the pieces that are new to the process. The overall improvement process or accreditation process isn't extremely different from what it has been in terms of having goals and a plan and an implementation period, and then looking at the data and then making plans for future work. But what we do have in this new model is a very serious increase in stakeholder participation. And the part that I, as a former classroom teacher, am really pleased to see is that we do actually have a framework for the school districts to work within. Those 5 R's give everybody a common structure throughout the state with which to discuss what's going on in their districts. So I really am glad to see that. The district leadership goals and leadership plans is a layer that has not been present, and the literature that I've read indicates that it's a layer that is necessary. The good districts have been providing leadership to their school buildings, but we want to make sure that all districts are providing the appropriate leadership to their buildings, and therefore this layer is in place for that purpose. The district leadership goals come from the data that is obtained in the needs assessment, and then the leadership plan. Leadership makes plans to support and guide the schools in their work. And then at the bottom we have the public transparency. This is critical as well because with this public transparency throughout the process, the stakeholders actually all become something of an outside validation team themselves, because they can watch the process unfold as it goes rather than just knowing it's going on and then at the very end seeing the rating. Okay, so that's something else that we're really excited about. The stakeholder participation, there are 3 places where stakeholders can participate. District employee stakeholders would participate in the building leadership team and the district leadership team. The other stakeholders, community members, business industry, and so forth, can participate through their building site council and the district site council. And then you have outside validation team, which is, a team of professionals who come in and work with the district, as they have in the past. I think it was called the external assistance team in the past. And then, of course, we have KSDE oversight of what's going on, and the public transparency comes into play there with the validation, because if a member of the public is looking at the accreditation information and says, hey, that's not going on, they have not done that, or, wow, they're doing a really good, whichever, they can say, call the school district and say, it says here you're doing this, and I'm not aware of that, and, it can just kind of help things stay positive and stay going in a positive direction. So for each of those things that we are adding to the accreditation model, we have the first one was the framework with the college and career ready results. And this is an important decision that the Accreditation Council made this year, and that was to change the 4 components under the results R. We wanted those to line up directly with the state board's definition of college and career readiness. So you can see that we've replaced what was there with those 4 ideas. We have academic and cognitive results, and that would represent state assessments, lots of other kinds of data that could come into play there. We have technical and career-specific results, such as industry-recognized certifications, work in specific career fields, and so forth. Employability, that brings in the idea of those soft skills that students need to have in order to be successful. And then the post-secondary evidence, which is what happens to these students after they graduate from high school. Are they going to college? Are they staying in college? Are they going into the workforce and being successful? And so forth. So we have 4 different areas of results that that districts will be able to use and to determine the work that they need to do and to determine the success of what they have done. The district leadership piece of it, again, I said this before, it gives a layer of accountability at the district level, and then it actively involves the district leadership and the Board of Education in the process. So to me, those are 2 critical pieces of the model that allow the whole systems idea to work. The public transparency. The state dashboard, I almost forgot the word, the state dashboard that is provided by KSDE would be the place where all of the data, all of the steps, process, and everything are showing to the public. And then behind that, there will be a technological, an authenticated app, which is what we use right now for all of the input that the districts do. But there will be an authenticated app in which the districts and all of the people who are working in the process go in there and input, here I did this, I did that, here's our goals, here's our whatever, all the way through the process. And then as they do that, it shows up live on the dashboard. Each school has its own dashboard, so when the buildings enter their goals for the year and they push submit to dashboard, those goals show up on the page. Then if they go back later and change them, the changes show up on the page so that the public can see those right away. Every district has a home page, and these links are on their home pages of their own website, and then the KSDE dashboard is actually located on our website, and everything goes live all the time to the dashboard. How this is going to happen is, like I said before, the accreditation work is accomplished through the system, the authenticated app, and it's going to be step by step, screen by screen, just like KEEP is really. some of the changes that are being made to keep right now are going to be inherent in the new accreditation authenticated app. I'm really excited to see those changes, and I'm really excited to see what this accreditation tool is going to turn out like, because superintendents, principals, they're going to be able to log into this system and just screen by screen it's going to tell them what to do. And they'll be able to go back and forth between pages. They'll be able to have a page at the beginning that shows them where they are, what they have left to do, and so on. Okay, the next idea was, this is a new idea, I guess, the QPA performance criteria and the new model. I just wanted to show how the performance criteria that we used in the QPA model is embedded in the new model, with student achievement, assessment participation, attendance rates, and graduation rates. That's QPA right there, performance criteria. But you can see that the R's, the 5 R's, including results, are shown in various categories there. They all interrelate. And again, we're not getting rid of any of the data that we've used for the past 20-some years. We are just embedding it and allowing school districts and schools to bring more data into the picture, to show a fuller picture of what they're doing. The process now, very simply, the QPA process is the buildings do the work and they report it to the state. The process for the new model would start with the buildings doing the needs assessments, reporting those to the state, and then also sharing, kind of at the same time, sharing those with the district. The district would then do its needs assessment and report it to the state. And when I say report to the state, I mean put it into the dashboard. Okay? When they put it into the dashboard, they're reporting it to us. They're also making the parts that have been designated to be public as public. Then the schools go back to work on the goals and the plans and so forth. And as they're going, they report that work to the state, and they report it to the district, and the district approves certain pieces of it going along the way, and then in the end it's all reported to the state. But as you can see, the dashboard is involved all along the way. Everything they're doing that has designated, in the system to be public is showing up on the dashboard in a live kind of a fashion. The process looks like this if you go year by year. First of all, the main ideas that are bolded are the ones that are the key pieces of the process. The needs assessment, that's nothing new. Conducting a needs assessment. The only thing different is we're using the 5 R's as a framework, so everybody's talking a common language. The district conducts a needs assessment after that, and then it decides overall what are our goal areas going to be. Which R or which 2 R's or which 3 R's are we going to focus on as a district for this 5-year cycle? And then the district site council, the building site council, the outside validation team, they are all involved in the process as well. And they all have a way to log into the system to have their discussions, give their feedback, and so on. Year 2, you can see we have the main components are highlighted or bolded. The building goals, the building action plan, then we have the district leadership goals. Basically the district is saying, okay, here's what our buildings are going to be doing. Now what do we need to do to support this and guide them in this process and make sure they're moving it along in the right direction. And so that's what the district leadership goals and plans are based on. And then, of course, at the end of year 2, hopefully there's time to start the professional learning process to get staff informed on how to do the things that need to be done. Year 3 is implementation. Everybody's gathering evidence and artifacts along the way. And then toward the end of the year, they start a mid-implementation review. Let's look at what's going on. How's this working? Is there anything we need to tweak? And at the end of that year, then those decisions are made and approved. And then year 4 begins with those changes, if any, in place. And again, still gathering evidence and artifacts. And then at the end of year 4, they really start gathering the data, start analyzing it. Year 5, they actually conduct a formal post-implementation analysis. In other words, they look at all their data and see how well this action plan has been working. They also conduct their on-site visit with the outside validation team, after which then they apply for their accreditation rating. The state board acts on those, and then the new accreditation rating goes into place and stays in place for the next cycle, and they just turn right around and start another cycle And, they may continue to do some of the same work they were doing before. It's an improvement process, and it's ongoing. And they turn around and start working on their next 5-year cycle while they maintain this accreditation rating. And the rating can change if the board acts to change it, of course, but they have that rating in place starting July 1, and it goes for 5 years. The accreditation statuses, again, those are an area of discussion that the council is going to have. It's on the agenda for the council's February meeting. But what we've been discussing here at the State Department of Education is possibly having 3 ratings: an accredited rating, which would be the ones who are completing all the requirements and they're demonstrating overall continued growth. And when I say demonstrating, I mean demonstrating. They have to have evidence, they have to have artifacts, they have to be showing. Each school has to be showing, and the district has to be showing that there's growth happening. Conditionally accredited would be public schools, public districts, I should say, with more than, say, a certain percentage, which has yet to be determined, of its schools they might be involved in mandated improvement programs, or they're showing little or no continual overall improvement. Maybe they're showing some improvement in some of those small pieces of data, but those overarching college and career readiness data may not be completely in place like they should be. And then conditionally accredited would also be used for the new non-public schools that are seeking initial accreditation. And then, of course, not accredited would be for the districts who really aren't performing at all, are not participating appropriately in the process, and so forth. What's to come? We have advisory recommendations. This will be what the advisory council is working on in February, looking at those prerequisites. I talked about the QPA quality criteria, and then if there's anything else that should be added to that list that we should be already expecting that schools and districts are doing before they start the new accreditation process. And then, of course, the real specific details and definitions of those accreditation statuses. And then rewards and sanctions, what would those look like in this new system? What work we have to do here at the State Department, of course, continue to guide the council, revise the regulations, work on that accreditation software, that authenticated application that everybody will use for the system, provide accreditation instructions and guidance for the field, users manuals, so forth. Provide, professional learning for the field and training for the outside validation team members, which was a specific recommendation of the council. And then, of course, just the details, the really, really nuts and bolts, minutia almost of the process, getting all of that in place. The regulations revision looks like this. Down the left-hand column, you have the regulation number that exists right now. In the middle, you have what that regulation is titled, its legal title. And then in the right-hand column, you have a look at what changes would need to be made in order to get this new model in place. And I'll let you look at the details of that later, but just so you know, that's what's on that slide. That would be the end of the information we have to present, so we can see what kinds of questions you might have.
Well, thank you. There was a lot of new material presented here this time. You've been busy.
Yes.
Yes, and your next meeting is February when?
9th.
February 9th. And where is it located?
Here.
Here.
Right here in this room.
Okay. One question that I have, and I don't see any questions coming forward, is relative to the 5-year cycle. I don't know many districts that don't have improvement plans under some other name or that name. And everybody has to start at the same place, but maybe we're kind of further along. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but I see some of the districts, like the innovative districts, for instance, that we've just talked to, Marysville. Are we going to make them stop and go back to and start over again?
No.
Or okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
No.
Yeah. So how do we accommodate them, and where would they be in the cycle?
Well, we have an implementation process in place Oh, yes, sorry. We have an implementation process, not in place as informal, official, but we're looking at some different possibilities for how to implement it. For example, there are 5 years, so we do kind of an implementation process where some of the districts are in Group 1 and they get their first accreditation sooner because they're farther along already, and we just have kind of we establish what do I want to call it, an abbreviated process for those people using what they've already done. And then after a period of 5 years, though, everybody then is back on track for a 5-year cycle, not all at once. The way I've done it is I've divided the districts into 5 groups, okay? And each group has a year when they would be accredited. And then after that happens, then one group a year is always starting, one group a year is always finishing, so that it all works out smoothly.
Well, my concern is one size doesn't fit all.
Right.
Okay, my concern is that, and I've been here, that I'm forced sometimes to go back and meet a checklist that I'm already beyond. And I can't believe a district out there today does not have some kind of improvement plan that's community-based, school-based, district-based.
Right.
And I'm just looking at this and I see there's a lot of work. But the districts are willing and have already done most of the work that you're describing. And sometimes, quite frankly, I think all I need is a team to come in and say, here's what we've done, here's where we are, maybe tweak it a little so it can give some standardization of reporting, and I really like the dashboard, but not make it where I have to go back and jump through all these hoops that I just don't need to do.
Right.
You're exactly right, because, and I wanted to jump in on this because this is part of what, as we go out and do the tours, the QPA Advisory Council makes up a lot of the school districts that you're describing. And especially, I'm listening to this, and we just heard Marysville. Marysville may already be 3 years, they've already done the needs, and they've already done, so it's got to be able to align to where they already are. But I think the biggest point is that's what we're wanting to see, so we want accreditation to reflect and model the ones that are already doing it right, as opposed to the way we've been accrediting them in the past. So some may be ready for that second cycle, some may be in the 4th year, so rolling it out, we know it's not going to be every district in the state starts at the same spot, because we know some districts have already gone through, because this is modeled after what a lot of districts have demonstrated works.
Yes. I just don't want everybody to stop and then we have to do a needs assessment and all improvement stops.
Right. Exactly.
That just doesn't make any sense. And I guess my point also is that we are more willing to accommodate and to recognize the good work that's going on in districts. And yes, we do need some standardization for dashboards and for reporting and such, but to be able to recognize I can't imagine a district out there that doesn't have a plan, and we just need to find out how our accreditation process fits into their plan rather than their plan fitting into our accreditation process.
Right. And the elements that we have in the new system are based largely upon what the school districts already do. And it's just a matter of, looking at what they do and seeing where they are in the process, pretty much letting them have a lot of input, if not a decision, in which year they start. I put a slide up that shows the schedule I was talking about. It's just a draft.
Great.
But it shows how it could be kind of feathered in over the 5 years.
Good. We have some questions. Kathy Bush.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think when we had the meeting at maybe the Brown Building, one of the concerns that I think was a lot of the board members is where do the buildings fit into this, because this is moving to a district accreditation model. And, you at least in this flow chart, this particular slide, show the buildings and the place where the buildings are involved. I don't know that it's in the verbiage that I see, but I see it here in the flow chart So I'm assuming your intent was that the buildings are certainly part of that process. Yeah, that number 14 there.
Yeah, the buildings conduct their needs assessment, and then the buildings have take the goals, make their action plans, and do their implementation, just like they have been doing, really.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then also on the 5 R's, you showed I don't think it's not the rubric, but you did show the model of the 5 R's, which, as I remember, there is a rubric, or there's going to be a rubric for each of these R's.
Yes.
So that will allow the schools and the districts a method to really measure their progress by, or assist them in establishing goals using those rubrics.
Yes, there are rubrics that already exist that were hammered out.
Okay. And then the dashboard piece seems to, I agree with Jim, the dashboard piece seems to be a good place as far as the data is concerned, and how you're able to get folks involved in that piece. This is much clearer than it was for me before. The thing, in addition to what Jim talked about, the thing that always concerns me in an improvement process is the schools/districts that are really doing the work versus the schools/district that can put together a good cart of stuff to show the accreditation team, but maybe they're really not doing the work. So I don't know how you deal with that, but I just want this to be certain that this is a process that is valid for the work and not just valid for the dog and pony show. Might be a simple way for me to explain that, and I think it'll take a little time to work through that. But that's always my concern with an improvement process, because some folks are good at talking the talk, but not walking the walk. So
Brad?
I don't expect a comment on that, but...
Well, I want to go back to what Marysville said, and for an example, because it's fresh in our minds. We want the accreditation to be more about clear, meaningful goals, looking at your data and having a plan in place to address them. And in the dashboard is a way, currently the dashboard is the building and district report card that only shows state assessment results. We want to create a dashboard where we can show academic results on a state assessment, but they could also show whether they're using Aspire or whether they want to do some Ames Web or other evidence of academic growth. Also technical, industry recognized certifications.
They're post-secondary data?
That's right. And what we really want is they could do the dog and pony show, but that dashboard will also have multiple that they get to choose, and it's unique to their district that they're focusing on other indicators and those post-secondary evidence, and it's framed around their unique community goals and their needs. So back to what Marysville, they are basically already into this process, so it would align perfectly, and then the dashboard allows them to be unique about how they want to measure in their goals. So
one final, question, comment, I'm not sure which it is, because some districts have used the old North Central, the new Advanced Ed. So where is this process as far as alignment with that? Or, because I know some schools have requested a waiver to use Advanced Ed, so where are we with that?
As far as I know, it's a similar approach, and Advanced Ed, it actually has a representative on the advisory council, so I believe that they are working to kind of incorporate what we're doing into what they do, and so it will definitely fit.
So are districts then going to be allowed to do Advanced Ed, or do we know that yet?
In the model, it talks about that third-party validation. Some district may choose to have advanced ed be theirs.
Their third-party
Right.
evaluator, okay.
That group that helps walk them through this process. I think ultimately the big question for the board is, would you allow a school district to not be accredited by you anymore and say, no, we don't want to use a dashboard, we don't want to do any of this? Is it okay if we just send you a letter saying advanced ed accredited us, and then you bless that? I think that would be the ultimate
That'll be a
decision with the
that'll have
board.
to be made.
But to answer your question, this aligns perfectly with being able to let a district say, and we want to use advanced ed to be our validation team to help us. But they would still have that dashboard, they would still go through the same process, which does align with what advanced ed's working on.
Okay, thank you.
Sally Cobble.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got my usual group. Let's start with the stakeholder participation slide. You have district employees, other stakeholders, and outside of validation. Nowhere on there do you have the local school board. But under another slide, you have district leadership goals/plans, and you have the local board with district leadership. So I'm just finding.
That should be, the board
Yeah.
should be there.
Yeah, okay, I knew. I'm just, for further use. Okay, let's go to the public transparency slide. I'm assuming that we have somebody on staff that can put together these dashboards, okay? But let me tell you something about our website. It's better than it used to be, but it isn't there yet. And I'm afraid when you go to do this, would you please make it user-friendly to people outside of education? A dashboard doesn't necessarily mean anything to some people, but results on schools accreditation might. So, you know, that's a big concern of mine. We have the neatest stuff on our website, but honestly, if you're not in education, you can't find it. Or I always have to call Peggy or something and ask them where to go and find it. I'm not surprised a bit that legislature wants somebody to come tell them how to use that site. That's just so far. Just a minute. I had another one. I'm like Kathy. I think the way you put this together to present it to us helped clarify a lot of things and a lot of process for us. I think maybe if you're going to present it to some other people, you might want to go ahead and put that definition of college and career ready so they understand where the 5 R's are coming from. That would be a recommendation, especially if you're going to talk to local school boards. And I wish that in the development of professional training and of leadership, you remember to bring the local school boards along in that training and understanding. Of course, we can work with our partner. Okay, let's talk about accredited, conditionally accredited, and not accredited. Personally, I like those 3 steps. I still think conditionally accredited, although a school is working towards that and they have it for 5 years, I don't think that's what we want to say yet. I think the definition of it is right. I'm just not sure that's the verbiage we want to say yet. So, and I may be the only one on the board that feels that way. But if we're going to give an accreditation status for 5 years, we need to make sure that we get it right. I never liked needs of improvement either. You know, I don't have a good thing off the top of my head yet, but I'm still having trouble with that one. And I guess I've already said everything. That's my suggestions and what I saw. And thank you. Your presentation really helped.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
I would like to piggyback on what Sally just said, and I think you'd have more of a likelihood of an evaluation team taking the step towards conditional accreditation if there was the process of getting that conditional accreditation status removed quickly. Many times, it would. I think it would be more likely to happen, and that you'd have their attention.
Or assessing their school, they're in the process of assessing their school, for accreditation, or something that, and can a USD in the state of Kansas even function if they're not accredited?
If I may, drawing parallels again to the higher ed, what happens with higher ed is when they go out on their visits, if they find an area that's actually called an AFI, Area for Improvement, and then depending on the severity of the situation, they receive what's called a focus visit. So it's at the in-between stage, so it doesn't have to be the full 7 years in the higher ed world or the full 5 years. But as you well know, we're taking this to the council, so I'll take that note down for sure.
Okay, thank you. Jim Porter?
He just answered my question.
Great. Very good. I would agree with our members here. Oh, I'm sorry. Dina, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The not accredited, we've talked about conditionally accredited and how the process might be adjusted so they could become fully accredited before those 5 years were up. What about the not accredited? Could they not also revise things and have that same opportunity?
I would think so.
And I would hope so too. And the on-site visits that are done by, I'm trying to find the outside validation team. The only place where I see that specifically mentioned is a district. Is the intent that it only be the district, or are buildings also involved in receiving a outside validation team's opinion as well?
Inside the authenticated application, the outside validation team is involved when the buildings do their plans, and then also when the district does its plans and implementate. They're involved throughout the whole process. And then I would, my vision of it would be certainly that at the time of the outside or the on-site visit, that the outside validation team would be reviewing the buildings as well as the district's leadership of those buildings.
So it's one team that would be, looking at all of the buildings in the district?
There are some details like that. That's kind of what I was talking about when I said there are some details in terms of manageability that we have to kind of iron out. But
in a very large district, that could be pretty overwhelming.
Right.
So, and that outside validation team, have we determined what their qualifications should be, or where they would come from? Who decides if they're an appropriate team, or is it the district that makes that determination, or do they have to get approval from the state?
I could probably, it hasn't, it's not in writing yet. But the approach we want to look at is the same way we did with teacher leader evaluations, where we set some guidelines. It has to look like this, but one district may say, well, we want to use advanced ed. Another district say, well, you know what, we want to work through the Jones Institute out of Emporia, so we
Or
would
the North
set.
Central
Or the
or
North,
something.
right, so we set the guidelines of it's got to look like this, but we let school districts choose how they want to do that, whether they want to create their own, they want to work with a local university, but
And-
that's how we're.
And I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, we don't want to say it's got to be
So
this
we're
way.
not involved in approving a lot of
What we're
lot of
hearing
things
is
like that.
there has to be some kind of a third-party qualified group say, hey, you're right on track, or, yeah, you're not just, putting stuff in the grocery cart and so.
But if they would choose to do the process through the State Department itself, you would train the individuals who would be then qualified
There will have to
to
be,
be a part of that outside validation.
there will have to
team.
be training on
Sure.
the guidelines.
Okay.
Yes, it's one of the council's specific recommendations, the next to the last one, is that the outside validation team be trained by the State Department so that they all receive the same, foundation of knowledge on the model and everything.
Does that mean teams that are connected with North Central or
That's getting into some
or
of the minutia again.
other groups, because they have their own team training, I would suspect. So I think that's certainly something that you need to maybe identify, and perhaps just the guidelines will answer that question. So thank you.
I think the presentation has taken us to another level in this process, and I appreciate it. Great job, Kelly. Good, very good presentation. You guys did a great job, Bill. And we look forward to the report after the next meeting. We're going to take a 10-minute break here until 3:33. 3:33. Can't see it. That'll work. Thank you. If we could bring the board back together again. Thank you, John. Not you, Morton. Get me in trouble. We're going to move right into the. Are we going to move right into the standards?
I think the next agenda item is update on migrant education.
How long is that going to take?
15 minutes. We could flip them since they're here.
Yeah, let's do it.
And Doug,
Yeah, they've been waiting.
Yeah.
As we begin after the recess, I would like to make sure I'd let you know I failed to do that earlier, that the electronic hand waving is working on your computer, so if you want to use that, that'll be good. I'd like to make a little adjustment in our agenda here, and actually, for a moment, if we could just jump ahead to the program of standards for professional education, school counselor, and agriculture. They've been waiting, and we're a little bit behind schedule, and they're from outside the department. So why don't we go ahead and we'll have the standards for counselor and agriculture presented. I think took a motion or something. I'll tell you one thing. Oh, you didn't get that here. No.
I just pulled the stitches out a few days ago and it's leaking.
Here's Scott. Where's Scott?
Oh, I bet Scott.
Is it their your Scott?
No Scott?
Well, I think Scott knew that there was one ahead, so he's just right down the hall. I knew the group was here, but I forgot Scott Myers.
How could we forget Scott Myers?
Well, you'll be.
See if he can run.
We're gonna let you go next.
I felt like O.J. Simpson in the airport. I'm glad you guys know that illusion. Alrighty, thank you so much for us to be here with you again. Last month, we brought you the, as a receive item, the standards around 3 different areas. I need to find my thing. The school counselor, the professional ed standards, and agriculture. And so today, we are here to take action on these 3. And by way of introduction, if you recall, the program standards are utilized for a couple of different reasons. To develop the preparation programs that are then ultimately submitted for approval. Then they redesign and work with use these standards to ensure that learners are up to speed with everything that's going on within the specific areas of concern that lead into education itself. There are 2 different general categories with the standards, those being the professional education standards themselves, which deals with the core teaching knowledge and skills, and then also the content program standards, which is the nuts and bolts of what it means to be an English teacher, the area of stuff you should just know about each one of the content areas. You had in your possession, and you have again today, we've moved to a standard format of a template for what we provide to you that will show the standard itself broken down in where it says standard 1 oral language in this example. And then often it's split down into smaller pieces into the functions themselves. And then underneath that, you'll see it tears it apart yet again, unpacks it into the content side and the professional skill side. And like I alluded to, or I said earlier, you have 3 different program standards to address today. We have Dr. Judy Huey here, who gave up her leg to be here to present. We have Dr. Stephen Herbstreet here for the agricultural education standards, and Dr. Gwen Landover will be here to talk about the professional ed standards. And we'll just go in order of the slide, and then make the presentation or answer any questions you might have. In your possession, you have a copy of the PowerPoint itself, a crosswalk document, which we put in as an addendum to you we sent last week, which lines out, the big, broad scope, what's this about. Then it shows the previous standard, new standard, language, and then a column says what's changed about it. Then you'll have the old standard itself, and then the new standard. So all the information you might need so as to address the topic of the day. As you well know, we are in the process, we're going to be unpacking all of the other content areas, and so over the next several months, we'll be bringing in the same format, in the same process, if you will, all of the other different areas that would need to be addressed. It's been a while since they've been adjusted at this level. So with that, Dr. Judy Huey, I guess I could bring the microphone. Okay. Attach this. Could you roll it this way, Judy?
Yes.
No. You got something?
Check. Oh, here. Check.
That's the
Maybe
easiest.
this one isn't on. Check.
I think,
Can we get it on?
can I, yeah.
Can you just bring it down?
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so the hardest thing will be for me to remember to stay in the chair and not stand up to talk, because I usually stand when I talk. So I will try to do that. Very briefly, I will go through the changes and talk about the school counselor standards. I mentioned to you last time that we as counselor educators are very excited about the revisions. However, I'm not going to say that they are revolutionary or that there are major changes with them, because they're not. We see them primarily as updates. And I think that that's reflected in the crosswalk. We were very intentional about updating language. For example, instead of guidance, classroom counseling. Across the nation, guidance is a rather antiquated term, and the profession uses classroom counseling now, and so you see that reflected in the revised standards. There's also much more emphasis on learning theories and integration into the mission of the school. A focus on collaboration and consultation with teachers and other professionals throughout the school district. We talk a lot about being integral to the mission of the school, and so there is an emphasis with that. Also, an emphasis on using data-driven interventions in programs and collecting data to be able to show the outcomes. Decades ago, for example, when I went through and when I began teaching, I don't know that counselor programs and our standards necessarily had an emphasis on collecting data to show the outcome of what a school counseling program did. And so the standards, the revised standards, have much more of an emphasis on program evaluation than what they did previously. Also, the alignment with the standards that Kansas has already emphasized throughout school districts: social emotional character standards, the college and career standards, the other workforce standards. We have tried to align our wording and our emphasis with the other standards that school districts have already implemented, so that the mission, there's similarity within the mission, and the scope. We would like to think that everyone is on the same page. Enhancing students to be academically successful, enhancing students' academic development, at the same time that we know that their career development and their personal social development is all part of that big picture. It's a big umbrella with several spokes. As I'm just looking through to see if there's any changes that I haven't mentioned. I think that I addressed the multi-tiered approach. It's referred to a lot. One of the questions that you asked me the last time that I was here, the individual student plans, if that was addressed, and yes, it is. It's in Standard 4. I think that all of the major changes I have addressed. Are there any questions or are there any concerns as you reviewed the standards that I would be more than happy to try to address any questions or concerns that you might have?
Steve Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How would you suggest that this simplifies our procedures or policies in any way? What simplifications are there?
Well, so I don't know that when we began the process of reviewing and writing, I wouldn't say that we had a focus of simplifying, but I think that in the long run they are there's clarification. So I guess that for a counselor in a district, when they read the standard, they will understand what it is that they are supposed to do and how they can do it and collect the data to know whether they were successful or not. So I believe that the language has been clarified. I don't know that I would use the word simplified, but I think that I would say clarified, because we've tried to use measurable language and language that, in fact, with the functions, for example, that a school counselor, that has meaning for a school counselor. So, for example, when we talk about collaboration with a language arts teacher in a work, helping a student with a resume, for example, because that's an area that both professionals have an objective. Both of those are going to understand what the standard and what the function will mean when they read that. So I think that the language has a clarity that perhaps it didn't before.
I might contend that some may take issue with some of the things you just said. I don't see that much clarity personally, but thank you.
Okay.
Dina Horst.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the standards that I believe are for counselors, it talks about on page 5, professional skills, addressing social justice. What is intended by social justice? Do you have a definition somewhere? Because I've read all sorts of different interpretations of social justice and what social emotional learning is. So
I'm not sure that I have the copy of page 5 that you do.
It's actually
Standard 8. Okay.
It's actually what's changed.
Okay. When we talk about social justice, that's talking about in a bullying program. The bullying programs that most of our schools use talk about social justice and talk about discrimination, respect for all individuals, regardless of race, religion, gender, all of those definitions. That's what that is referring to, respect for all.
Okay. And then the social emotional learning, is that connected with that same concept?
Social emotional learning is connected with the character ed, the social and character ed standards that Kansas uses.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And we did a crosswalk with those standards. In fact, I have a copy of them with those standards and these standards and the student standards that we are working on.
Well, I have to say, after reading these, the amount of knowledge, work, and commitment counselors have to have is huge. They've got everything in here. It's amazing. Plus, they have to schedule kids in classes and all those things we don't tell them about.
Big hard, yes.
Yes. Yes. And for so many schools, what's typical number of students per counselor?
Well, ASCA, the American School Counselor Association, recommends that the ratio is 1 to 250. And a new report that just came out, you may have received that, also reports that the most successful schools are those that have the ratio of 1 to 250. Kansas does not necessarily meet that ratio, and Kent Reed has shared with us what the ratio is, and I don't want to repeat it because I would probably miss it. I don't know, Ken, do you remember what that is? But it's higher than 1 to 250. And sadly, I will share too that we have some districts that do not have elementary school counselors, which is absolutely heartbreaking, in my opinion, because our children need school counselors at all levels, in my opinion, and so it's difficult, but we have wonderful school counselors in our state that are very committed to children and families, and so we can be we're very lucky.
Yes, counselors doing a wonderful job. They're and they're so important at so many times of crisis, in our schools. And if they haven't laid the framework for those relationships when the crisis does come, their effectiveness is minimized.
That's correct.
So they have to do these things prior to those times. And though we never want to be in a crisis, regrettably they do occur. And a counselor becomes one of the most pivotal, in a successful transition out of that crisis back to normalcy.
And I think it's important for individuals to know too that the counselor sees everybody in the school, not just in time of crisis, but is in the classroom working with the teacher, enhancing academics for everyone. And then when that personal crisis comes or the school crisis comes, the counselor can be pivotal or can be a wonderful resource. But unless the counselor is there and getting to know families and students at all points in their life, then that trust isn't necessarily there. And so, and they can be such a wonderful resource for teachers and for learning issues. So.
Regrettably, people see them sometimes as a luxury or as a secondary or non-essential personnel, and they're so important, to the success of students.
They are.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
On these standards, as we go through them, I would prefer that we take each one of those individually rather than cluster them as a group and vote on them. This is an action item. You were here prior, and we've had our discussion. And I would entertain a motion to accept the standards as presented. Dina Horst moves and Janet Waugh seconds. Any further discussion? Mr. Willard?
Thank you. I'm just reading the Standard 8 of what's changed, additions to, I think someone else referred to that. And I'm wondering, these professional skills, what identity development is.
Eric Erickson is the most often the person that we talk about when we talk about identity development, but helping a child grow from birth through adult, being a mature, learning how to mature, to make good decisions, character development, finding out how to contribute to the world, strengths, interest, self-discovery, that kind of thing. So when we talk about identity, we're talking about, so who am I? How will I contribute to the world? What are my strengths? Eventually, what will I major in college? What kind of courses will I take? It's part of the maturity process.
Okay.
Eric Erickson is the person that we most often, and there are many of them, but he's the one that we talk about a lot. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hearing no further discussion, we'll call for a vote. Please raise your right hand to signify you approve the standards. Thank you. And I didn't see any opposition, or one. Okay, I'm far away, Steve. Okay, 9-1 with Mr. Roberts in opposition. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Learned a lot from reading these, and I've always appreciated what counselors do and just how hard their job is.
I'll share that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll stand for my presentation. I'm Dr. Gwen Landover from University of St. Mary, and I head up the education department there and served on the committee that revised the professional ed standards. I believe Nancy Dameron, my colleague, presented to you last time these were brought up to the board. If there's questions, I'll be glad to address them. I really like the way that we've organized it with the crosswalk. I think that it really outlines the different categories of the standards, makes it much more user-friendly than in the past. You'll note at the top, like in the other set of standards, we have the general information about the standards revision and how it's changed since the last time with the old standards. So what we did was, as a committee, we really looked at the in-test standards that we've used in higher ed teacher prep programs prior, and we really wanted to look at those first and see what was already created and then put the Kansas stamp on it. And so that's one thing that the committee looked at. We really felt like we needed to integrate the 21st century skills into the standards more than they had been in the past. We, again, wanted to organize it under the different categories so that when we were looking at how we would have our teacher candidates as well as people in the profession meeting the standards, we could look at that in broad categories. We also made sure that it aligns with KEEP, and so that it takes not just what we're doing in teacher prep, but as teachers are in the profession, how they continue to meet the standards. We wanted to make sure that that was really well defined, and our administrators who were on the committee did push back a little as we had these discussions. Okay, how does it look in the schools? How does this look for veteran teachers? So we did have that nice dialogue as we were planning out the different standards and what that looks like. It really, we felt like we needed to put more relevant and rigorous language related to Kansas college and career ready standards to make sure that that was all aligned, and really change the verbiage from students to learners. So those were kind of the big ideas of things that we looked at as we went through the revision process. We do have in the crosswalk, again, what changed in each of the different standards. One thing I wanted to draw attention to is we started out with 13 standards and got them down to 10. And one of the things that we believed as a committee was the idea of technology. Instead of having the standalone for technology, it really needed to be woven in the other standards because it's just embedded. That's the world we live in. We didn't feel like we needed a separate standard, just integrating it throughout. So those were the main notes I made about it. I would say that really we emphasize the idea of accommodating all learners and an increased emphasis on that. We know that since the last set of standards were approved, really the different needs that a teacher sees in their classroom setting has changed, and we really want to make sure that educators are meeting all the different learner needs that they see. We also see an emphasis in that professional learning. So it's ongoing. It's not just when you finish and get your degree, you're in the classroom, you're still doing professional learning ongoing throughout your career, that lifelong learning. And then the other thing is really the emphasis on using multiple measures of student performance. So not just the test at the end of the semester or at the end of the year, but looking at constantly assessing students, how they're learning, the learners, and then what are you going to do about it to make sure that they are learning and their needs are being met. So those are the big ideas from my perspective. What questions do you have for me?
Mr. Willard? Oh, I'm sorry. I'll remove it. Mr. Roberts?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This language is wonderful language, but whatever it is, it ain't standards. At least in the world of engineering, when we have standards, we have something we can measure. You have some very nice aspirational language. You have, it's inspirational, it's aspirational, it's goal setting, it's reaching for the stars. You know, it's not far from our state motto, to the stars through difficulty, but my God, these aren't standards. And I don't know how we got to this point in society. We got so far away from standards. You know, I could give you a math problem right now and ask you to solve it. And if you couldn't, then I could explain to you how to solve it. And that should be part of the standards to get math teachers into the classroom. In my opinion, this doesn't help. And I'm sort of a voice in the wilderness here. We've got a lot of other educators who have different opinions that this is more good. I cannot support this because these aren't standards. They're not measurable. Or if they are measurable, they're certainly not easily measurable. Thank you.
Any other comments? Questions? Thank you for your work on this. Not to become combative, but I like the standards, the way they have evolved, and in terms of they are briefer than the ones in the past. It does provide good leadership in terms of working with KEEP and other evaluation tools and systems. It also does clarify, for me as a principal or as a teacher, you know, those things that I'm going to be expected to do in the classroom. And then I, as the evaluator, will measure those to see if you're actually doing them or not doing them. And we know that many, as I read these standards, these are standards that will improve instruction if they're utilized. So to your team and to you, thank you very much for what you've done. Wait a second, I've got a late entry here. Mrs. Bush.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The professional responsibility component, at least in the crosswalk, it's on 4 of 4. I appreciate when I talk to administrators in the field, what they tell me is when they have a teacher who they have concerns about, most generally it falls in this category.
Good point.
That for whatever reason that person is not able to work in this professional responsibility domain. And that's where they may have to put somebody on a plan of assistance or do a non-renewal process, is because of this particular category. So I think there is improved clarity with these standards, particularly in that area, so I appreciate that. That being said, I would like to move that we take the recommended action in approving these professional ed standards.
It's been moved that we approve the professional standards. Do I have a second? Oh, Caroline Campbell, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. Those in favor, please raise your right hand, signifying that you support. I think we have 9. Those opposed? 1. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today.
Our next set of standards is in agriculture. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Steve Harpstride in Ag Education at Kansas State University and had the privilege of chairing this particular committee. I know that you've already seen them and you've had a chance to take a look at them. The crosswalk is there. Basically, it's the old standards and new standards because there's really no way to try to cross. I mean, there are enough. Our new standards are enough different that there's no way to really do a crosswalk on those. Really, the committee took to heart your little statement over there. Everything that we thought about had to do with students, and will this help us prepare individuals that will lead our agricultural education programs into the 21st century and make sure that students get those good opportunities. So basic changes is we did add the career cluster and agriculture pathway language to the new sets of standards, along with we really took to heart the Kansas College and Career Ready standards to make sure that those are a part of that, so that our students, when they get finished and are going to go into our high schools to teach what is a very important, I believe, program in the state of Kansas, because agriculture is important to the economy of Kansas, to deliver what is a very unique, I think, delivery model for education in our program, which includes classroom and laboratory instruction, experiential learning, and leadership development through SAE and, as you all probably know about, the FFA. So all of those kinds of things are involved in the new standards, and I believe they're really going to take us in the direction that we continue to need to go, going to cause our students to be those outstanding teachers that we want them to be. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions or comments? Mr. Roberts?
What is SAE?
Supervised Agricultural Experience Program. It's an opportunity for students to apply what they're learning in the classroom in a practical, real-world application.
John Bacon?
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment. I don't know, maybe you can explain to me why you specifically called out FFA. Typically, when you see a standard, you talk about the type of organization, but here you want this teacher to know about FFA.
Because that is the education, the piece nationally in the leadership development that is a part of our program, has been historically part of the program since Smith Hughes. Well, it didn't get organized until 1928, but since then we've really had that three-circle model of delivery that is intercurricular, not extracurricular.
You know, I'm not knocking or making light of what FFA is. I think it's a great organization, but in a sense it says, well, you can't be a good ag teacher unless you know FFA. Well, I don't know about that. I think you could. So I would rather it defined the type of organization FFA is and the type of connections that's important to make without just tying it to one organization. That's the only observation I made. So
I accept that, but
additional comments? Questions? I would ask for a motion to approve the standards. Carolyn Campbell moves that we accept the agricultural standards as presented. Sally Cobble seconds. Please indicate your approval by raising your right hand. I do believe we have a 10-0 on that one. Okay.
Thank you
All right.
very much.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. Okay, we're going back to migrant. Okay, we're going to go back to item 19, update on Kansas Migrant Education Program. Doug, are you ready? In a moment.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
I'm Doug Bolane. I'm an assistant director on the Early Childhood Special Ed and Title Services team. Also the state Migrant Education Program Director as designated. My colleague is Jamie Fistner. She is a program consultant for migrant, neglected and delinquent, and Title I programs, LCP, etc. So she does a lot of things. Our team deals with, I guess, the students that already have a couple of strikes against them. We also handle homeless, the ELL population, the SOL, are all part of our group. I was asked to provide a little information on the migrant program. I've got a PowerPoint, and I'll try not to read it to you, but just hit the high points or the things that I wanted to stress. You can read the details as you go through or at your leisure. The first thing I kind of wanted to do was to present a little clarification. A lot of times in the media or when you hear people talk, you hear migrant, refugee, and immigrant used in the same context or as the same group of people, and they are not. They are three distinct populations. There could be some overlap between them. It's possible that a refugee could be a migrant worker. It's possible that immigrants could be migrant workers, but they don't necessarily all go together. Like I said, each one's a distinct population. Each one comes with its own baggage, so to speak. They have different federal programs that service them. If you are truly a refugee, you have a whole department that supports you. If you are immigrants, like they talked about the kids that came to the border last summer, there is a set of policies that deals with them. And so it kind of frustrates me when people confuse those groups and just say, well, they're migrant kids. So just wanted to get that out there in front to start with. So kind of what I've prepared is just Migrant 101. What is our program? What do we do? What does it look like? The purpose of our program is to make sure that migrant kids benefit from a free public education, just like everybody else, that they achieve on our state standards and meet the same criteria that we expect of everybody else, and that they graduate from high school. Who are migratory children, or what are the characteristics that they have to meet? We will service them up until they are 22 years old, so birth through 21. They're entitled to a public education. That means they haven't graduated from high school yet, so as soon as they graduate from high school, we've considered that we've done our job, basically. They are related in some way to a migratory agricultural worker. Either they themselves are, their parents are, their guardian, or they're married to one. They have to have moved to obtain a job in agriculture in the last 36 months or 3 years, and they have to cross district boundaries when they do so. So they're moving from one school district to another. So we talk about what is qualifying work, because that's in essence how we identify these children, is that they either have these jobs or their parents have these jobs. Temporary or seasonal employment. Seasonal is pretty easy. It's the crops or whatever, that there's certain times of the year that things have to be done during planting season or when they harvest, or if they're cutting tassels off corn or whatever it is. These things happen at a certain time of the year. An influx of labor is needed to take care of that, and when that job's done, then they're moving on. So the temporary one is part of or another section of the work, and that's they're jobs that they're not seasonal, but it's a job that nobody holds on to very long because of the rigors of the job. People that work in the packing plants, a lot of times they don't stick with that for a long time because it's tough work. The length of stay isn't that long, and I think those statistics, I think the Department of Labor comes up with them, but they can track and figure out which jobs it is that people will take. They'll do them for a while, and then they decide there's got to be something better, and they move on. So that's the temporary piece. Second bullet, the production and initial processing of crops. So I've got another slide that kind of defines that. Production is just production agriculture, either with plants, animals, We also, the Migratory Education Act deals with fishing also. We don't have a lot of fishing in Kansas, but when you get on the coast, that's considered migratory work also. But we do have fish farms in Kansas, so we do fall under that last bullet there. So, but like I said, it's just the production of plants and animals. And then we get into the next one, which is the initial processing. And this is how we pull in the processing plants. We're killing cattle or hogs or chickens or whatever it is. As long as we're not working on the finished product, then they can count that as initial processing. So I've got the different pieces of that. And that initial processing piece is also how we can qualify some of our parents when they work in dog food factories or something like that, where they're still getting the raw product, and as long as they're doing that initial cutting, we can count that. Or the specialty meats, like where they smoke the bacon and make sausage and that kind of thing. As soon as they inject the flavoring or whatever into the bacon, it's not initial processing anymore. So we can qualify some people that way. Just samples of the different types of qualifying work we have in Kansas. These are probably the most common ones. A lot of farms and ranches where they'll work someplace and then move on to another one down the road or whatever. Feedlots, packing plants, nurseries, orchards. There's poultry operations, swine operations, dairies, elevators, and wineries. Just a small sample, but those are the main ones that we use. There's others, of course, but those are the biggies. So then the next thing is, how do we find our migrant population? And we passed out a map to you. The one that's got the 5 colors on it represents how we break up the state as far as our identification and recruitment. We've got 20 different recruiters that scour the state looking for our migrant workers. They have developed relationships with, they sent me their list the other day. They've got over 300 different farms, businesses across the state that they have made contact with, that those employers then will let our recruiters know that they've got possible migrant people moving in and that maybe we should come interview them. They work with the biggies: Tyson, National Beef, Seaboard, and Cargill. So those are the big names that everybody recognizes, but there's lots of little ones also. You've got a copy of the map. Once our recruiters have found a family and they've done the interview and they've determined that they think that this family will qualify as migrant workers, they'll go ahead and write a certificate of eligibility, also called a COE. There's one recruiter will write it, another will review it. If they both agree that it's good, they'll send it off, and another committee of 5 will review that to make sure that they actually do qualify. We also will go back and we do what we call a rolling re-interview, where we'll randomly select a few, or every 5th or 6th one, and take a look at them again just to make sure we've got the right people identified. But once they are approved, then that's when a child can start receiving services. Just thought I'd throw some numbers out to you. The other day when I was putting this PowerPoint together, I ran our roster of migrant students in the state, and I came up with 5,300. That number changes depending on the day that you run the report, because it is a migratory population and they move a lot. And so I could run it now and run it an hour later and I might not get the same number again. So it changes all the time. When we are looking at allocations for districts, we consider the fact that kids have moved in and out. We don't hold them to a single day of the year for their count. We try to compensate for that moving in and out and give them the benefit of the kids that have been there for the year. So, but anyway, there's another 430 that are considered continuation of services, and that means that they're, and I don't think I've got to that slide yet, but they're eligible for 3 years once their services start. Continuation of service mainly applies to high school kids. If their eligibility ends while they're in high school, we can continue to provide services to them until they graduate. We don't get to count them in our federal count, but we can still give them services to make sure that they graduate from high school. The other map I gave you is divided up into 3 portions. The bold cities, districts are where we have a high enough migrant population that we provide them their own separate allocation. There's 46 of those, most of them concentrated, or half of them concentrated in the southwest corner of the state, but they're spread throughout. We've got the 3 service centers, southwest, northwest, and then southeast, or Greenbush, that provide services to the kids that are ones and twos in districts where they might only have one kid, and we really can't give them money for that, so we try to provide services for them. They also provide services for the out-of-school youth, and I'll talk about them in just a minute. In case you're interested, where do we stand as far as migrant is concerned? Kansas, according to our allocation, the original authorization of ESEA, when they figured that, we were number 5 as far as our allocation. So we're behind the big 3, Texas, California, and Florida. Washington's ahead of us, and then we're number 5 as far as allocations go. If you ranked them by our 2013 enrollment numbers, which is the last ones that we have, we would drop to number 9. Georgia, Alaska, Arizona, and Oregon would jump ahead of us. And so one of the things we wonder about reauthorization is, will it change our funding, because our numbers are down, but everybody's numbers are down. It's just a little bit of shifting there in that top 10 for the most part. Give you that one. Okay, what kind of services do we provide? Migrant students are entitled to be part of any of the other title programs, and in fact they are supposed to participate in those first. So Title I, ELL, ESOL, at-risk special ed, they qualify for those, they're supposed to get those. That makes the funding that we give a little difficult sometimes, because it's the cherry on top. You're supposed to use everything else first, and then if you still have needs, then you dip into your migrant account. So some of our districts sometimes find that a little difficult to spend their money. Reading and math instruction, extra, it's supplemental. It's not their core instruction. They should get that first, and then we can come in and tutor them with migrant money or give them extra help that way. As far as MTSS, we've encouraged schools that are using MTSS that your Tier 2 interventions, if you've got migrant students, that might be a way to hire a teacher for a couple hours to help those migrant kids as part of your Tier 2. Language support, before and after school tutoring, hiring paras, conducting summer school. We do a lot of advocacy. We do provide some health benefits in emergencies. We don't intend to be health insurance for the migrant kids, but if they have a toothache that they can't get fixed and can't pay for, and it's keeping them from learning, we'll pay for get a cavity fixed. The districts just ask us for reimbursement. We've got some money set aside for that. Nutrition, they are qualified for free lunches, but we can also set them up for some other things possibly. Providing transportation, and I mentioned earlier, this is good for 3 years. That's how long eligibility lasts, unless they move, and then it starts over. We also offer additional grants. You all approved these in the spring. Migrant Family Literacy is one of the grants that we offer. This is the only way that we can help parents, is if a district runs a migrant family literacy, then part of the requirements of the grant is that the parents take part in their child's early education, and so we can give them some English language instruction also. That's the only time we can help adults. We also have a summer school grant that you all approve. Out-of-school youth is a special population, not enrolled in a K-12 school. Possibly they're dropouts. They may be working on their GED outside of the district. Some of them just came here to work. They really weren't concerned about going to school. They came to get a job. And they may or may not be emancipated youth. Right now, in our data system, we show about 1,600 OSY, or out-of-school youth kids. 400 of those we think are high school age. This is, like I said, this is a tough population to get a handle on. About 600 of those are pre-K. So that leaves us about 600 in that junior high or elementary K-8 age that I'm a little iffy about. The high school ones or older we can find and try to provide them services. I mentioned the OSY K-12 on the map, that the service centers split up. This year we combined that, dropping into the districts that have 1s and 2s and helping them with their migrant students that are enrolled. But we combined working with those OSYs. We figured they're already in the district. We know where they are. Let's find them while we're working with the other kids too. Most of our advocates that are out there will try to counsel a kid back into school, try to get him to go back, get a high school diploma, get a GED, get something. You know, that's not always the case, but that's always their first thing they're going to shoot for. If the kid really doesn't want to, then we look, how can we help them survive in the United States, basically? How do they function in society? Get them some English, let them know how to navigate the healthcare system or whatever it is so that they're successful. We are the lead state in what's called a consortium incentive grant, or a SIG, and it is specifically about out-of-school youth. There's 20 states. We're the lead state. We've got a little handout or the booklet of their executive summary, the different things they've done in the last couple of years. Our grant was extended for a 3rd year to keep going on that. Pretty interesting group. It's interesting to see what other states have and how they tackle this problem. So I feel like we've got a good handle on it based on what I see others do, but that's just my bias. Mention a few of the things that have come out of the SIG grant. There's a whole lot more listed in here that you can read. Or different organizations that we belong to. IMEC, the Interstate Migrant Education Council, is the one that Sally represents the board on. Somebody mentioned reauthorization a little bit earlier. This is a group that we might get some input into what migrant looks like if reauthorization occurs. I also am a member of the National Association of State Directors of Migrant Education. They also do some lobbying, but I don't think they do quite as much as IMEC does. IMEC, I think, has a lot more voice. OME is just the Office of Migrant Education. So SOCI, I mentioned, that's the SIG grant. In it is another SIG grant. We're sort of a member. We're on the fringe. We don't participate wholeheartedly in that one, but we do benefit from what they do, but we don't get any money for it. This one it's also called the binational because it's transcripts from the U.S. to Mexico and back, so the kids get credit for courses they take here as well as courses they take there. They try to align them so that a kid coming here isn't placed in 9th grade just because nobody likes the courses that are on his Mexican transcript. So, and then it's also an exchange program for teachers. A couple of websites that you can find information about the MEP. One is the KSDE one, that's the top one, and then there's a separate KS Migrant that mentions some of the other programs that we have going on. And then my contact information and Jamie's, and that's it.
Well, thank you very much. Very informative. Very good. Thank you. Any questions, comments? Mr. Roberts?
Thank you. This is going to be a very unfair question. So
I hope I'm ready.
Yeah. First, God love you for what you're doing. How many what percent, your best guess, of the students in your programs that you're reaching out for, how many are willing spirits? In other words, I'm asking this in the context of, a lot of kids from, and I'm not familiar with all that much in terms of the migrants, but I am more familiar with kids, say, from the hood, another at-risk group. Some are willing spirits, they just need to catch a break, and others are not willing spirits. No matter what we do, it's like pushing a wagon up a hill with a rope. So this unfair question is, what fraction or what percentage of the students in our migrant populations that we're reaching out to serve are willing spirits to take what we give them and run with it?
I don't even know if I could make a good guess. I'd say 70 to 80 probably, because that's where our OSY population probably comes from, is the ones that aren't interested in that K-12 education.
And is there any discernible differentiation between primary and secondary in what you just quoted?
Maybe it's just my bias, but I think as they get older, they probably get a little more jaded, and I would say the little kids are probably more willing to take advantage of what we have to offer. That's just my bias. Being a high school teacher, I always think the little kids were better.
For what it's worth, I think it's good to bring some bias to some of these issues. Thank you.
Sally Cobble.
Is anybody ahead of me? I'd like to piggyback on that, Steve, your question, and I'd like to answer it as a local school board member in one of those we found that the parents of the migrant workers, the majority of them really want their children in school. And education is important to them because they want them to get a better job than what they have. They want what's better. Where we lose it is when the child has been moved so many times as they reach 5th and 6th grade and junior high, that it's like, they have the same development as any kid at that age. And so, but my experience on the local level, you had a very good response out of the kids in the migrant.
Mrs. Campbell?
Well, I want to thank you for this presentation because our migrant families are, a concern of mine. I have a question. I would like to know how much the state receives funds to distribute. And in my district, District 4, could you, your records, can you tell me how many families I have? Are your records broken down like that you could
I could
share?
tell you how many students.
That's good. I would like to know, even know that.
We get approximately $11 million every year.
Okay.
Of that $11 million, we pass out to the districts about close to $9 million between allocations and the extra grants between 8 and 9. We spend about $1 million a year on identification and recruitment. Then we've got our quality control for our COEs, and making sure we're running everything correctly takes up the rest of it.
Okay, now where are the fish farms?
Southeast Kansas, I believe. Down in the southeast corner is where most of them are.
Okay, that was new to me. Thank you.
Mrs. Cobble?
Thank you. As you can tell, this is dear to my heart. For one thing, Doug, thank you. And thank you for the leadership you provide us nationally. I don't know that this whole board realizes he's such an integral part on the Interstate Migrant Council. Thank you for that. I appreciate your common sense approach to that. Also, some of you might remember that we used to spend $6,000 a child to send them to KU in the summertime. Remember when you guys weren't on the board. I'm looking at Janet and you and whatever. Doug has come in and is providing some camp services at colleges on a little different approach on that.
We're working on that.
He's working on that. But
It hasn't
we can all thank him for that because, there are some migrant students in the part of the state that might end up going to KU, but when you start busing them in from southwest Kansas, it gets a little funky. Maybe Hayes is more reliable, or a community college may be more realistic for the migrant student.
We're working on a pilot with Liberal for this summer, and if that goes well, then we'll spread it out to the different parts of the state.
I want to thank you for that. But this was an item that I asked to be put on because we have new ones and whatever, and I don't think we've had a migrant report in a while. My concern is when we start looking at these numbers, when you look at the out-of-state students that he's responsible for, and then if we could ever get a good handle on our homeschooling numbers. And, the homeschooling numbers do not bother me out of those homeschools that are really doing what they're supposed to. But I keep getting calls from foster care students, parents, that we've got a problem in the state with those signing up for homeschooling that are doing it for truancy. And we as a board are not responsible for that. The legislature is responsible for homeschooling. But I'm just concerned if we really believe that our youth are the future of Kansas. What percentage of our youth are we not even getting a hold of and educating? And talk about a school board member getting on their bandwagon. Thank you, Jim. I'm done. Thank you, Doug.
From your definition, I would imagine that this is a pretty mobile group of folks. And as your definition says, they have to cross school boundaries. It has to be temporary work, seasonal. I guess for me, how many, you had the number of students, how many migrant workers do we have? Any idea in our state? No idea. No. I see a lot of them clustered down in southwest Kansas.
We've got southwest, they go west into Colorado, they go down into Oklahoma, northeast corner, the KC metro area, they're going over into Missouri, a lot of them, going that direction.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And then Arkansas in the southeast corner.
Huge challenge. Thank you for what you do. Thank you to the folks that are out there in the field identifying and searching for these folks, because they're the ones that least know about their opportunities or supports that are there. Yeah. And as parents, they want to see their kids have a better life, but have no idea how to access those, and many times are afraid to access those. Don't see bureaucracies as friend, but too often as the opposition.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much.
You bet.
Appreciate your report.
Jim.
Yes, sir.
We do have some handouts there.
I'm sorry.
If you all are interested in them.
I'm sorry. Ken, you returned. Okay. I'm sorry.
I did return. I had to step out for an official phone call. So, but this probably has already been answered. But where does the funding come from for the migrant?
Federal.
The federal funding. That's what I thought. And you said there were three-year eligibility. I think you said
students once they are identified and a COE is written, they have 3 years of eligibility as a migrant student. But if they move, cross a district boundary, obtain new qualifying work, it starts all over again.
Okay, so they could get.
So they could move to Colorado
okay.
for a couple of years and come back here and start all over. They could be in Dodge City, move to Kansas City, start all over.
It starts another 3-year cycle?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If a new COE is written because they obtain new qualifying work, then they can get a new one. Otherwise, we'll go off the old COE and finish out that eligibility.
Yeah. And the funding flows to the school, is that correct? or?
Flows through us to the schools.
Yeah. The money ultimately goes to the school.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Or the service center.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mrs. Horse?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just listening to some of the last conversation, if a student moves, does the school district keep the money? Or, so they get to keep the money, it's based on...
The allocation is
like
is
the
for a year.
allocation is the count date the same as our other count date, or is it more flexible?
The money that the school districts received this year is based on their numbers from last year. So they're always working a year behind, which makes that a little bit tougher to keep the money up with where the kids are if we get a big shift. We try to take, it's a count of all the kids that moved in and out of the district for the year.
We're one short of these.
Here, I have all this.
There's a whole box.
Well, hoarding. Okay, thank you. And another question, too. This is totally based upon the parents' their employment.
Or the child's if they happen to be the worker.
Okay. So when we look at the bolded areas, that's where the money is going.
Those are districts that have approximately 20 migrant kids in their district.
So there could be more districts that are receiving money.
Well, they're receiving services, they're not receiving money.
But they just don't have enough for you to bold them. Is that like...
Greenbush, Southwest Plains, and Northwest Kansas each get allocations to service those districts that only have 1 or 2 kids. So the money is at the service centers, and then they provide services to those districts that only have 1, 2, 3 kids.
Okay. I see. So they're not, but those districts aren't identified on this map.
No, not on that map, but we've got it. We can run a list to see, that there's 2 kids in Holton, or there's...
I'd appreciate knowing how many kids are in each community. Thank you.
I think I can run a report that's just numbers.
I think someone else.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Good information.
Thank you.
Matt, thank you for your patience. I believe no.
Quick one with Scott.
Scott, a quick one with Scott. All right. Scott, you're here. You're back.
Unfortunately, this brings us to the third of the 3 visits from Scott Myers to the board today. I come before you today with a recommendation for an appointment to the Professional Standards Board. Every so often we receive, for various reasons, people decide to resign. And so we've gone through the proper chains and received a recommendation from USA for Catherine Booker to represent the special education administrators on the Professional Standards Board to serve the remainder of the term for the individual she was replacing. And so that term would end in June of 2015, at which point we would need to look at the vacancy again.
Moved by Sally and seconded by Bill. Jim, I'm sorry. God, you look like Bill. How did Bill get in there? But that's the nastiest? Oh, nicer. Okay, moving right along. We have It's been moved and seconded. For the appointment of Catherine Bucher to a partial term on the Professional Standards Boards to run January 13th through 15th through June 30th to 15. That's very nice of her to do that. Please raise your right hand if you approve of this. Thank you very much. 10-0. Thank you. Scott, that was a good one. Okay, Matt. You have been very patient. Thank you. This is the quarterly report on college and career ready standards in science.
Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with the board. I'm going to pull up a couple of things. We're going to do sort of, since it's January and we're sort of in the year-end review sort of a phase, we're going to do a couple things to catch us up and look at what we're doing to move forward with implementation in Kansas around science standards in particular. As soon as I pull this up, I'll just take a minute. How's everybody doing today, by the way? I can't promise that I'll pull off the 3 minutes that I pulled off the last time I gave an update, but I will try to move things quickly, as I know folks are four. I get 4 whole minutes. Does that start when I started, or does that start after I? Dang it! I started. Okay, so just some quick updates. Just thought I'd review sort of the history on this a little bit, since Jim is new to the board. Oh, Bill, right. So this process that we started around science implementation actually dates back to 2009, when the framework for K-12 science education process started. We put in a feedback on that process. It was in public review, and that document was finished in 2010. And that document was put together by the National Research Council, the Board on Science Education, and was the foundation. It's the update of research from the mid-90s when we last had national science standards up through present day on what research tells us about how students best learn science. And then in August of 2011, the board at that time voted to put in a lead state application to develop the next generation science standards. And in September, not too long after, Kansas was selected as one of the lead states for that process. We put together a team of folks, again, with recommendations from the board. We had 60 people, including folks from K-12 science education, post-secondary, business and industry, informal science educators, and such across the state, with at least 3 folks from each board district. We're involved in a review process that included 4 drafts that the Kansas team saw, in addition to two complete public drafts in that process that well over 4,000 folks from Kansas weighed in on the public draft. Since that point, the standards were finished in June of 2013, or actually, excuse me, they were adopted in June of 2013. They were finished in April of 2013. The Kansas standards team went back through them, sort of combed through them, and made sure that they met the expectations of what they were hoping would be for students in Kansas, and they recommended them to the board, and then the board adopted them as the Kansas College and Career Ready Standards for Science in June of 2013. Then, all the fun work began. So 2 years in, we get to the fun work. What we've been talking about here with implementation is really trying to encourage folks in districts to dream big about what they can do to support science education and to use the science standards as an opportunity to move things forward. So we've talked with districts both sort of in a variety of different ways about planning this out and making sure it's a smooth transition, taking your time, doing this well, and again, using those standards as an opportunity to move things forward. Setting their vision for science education, engaging critical stakeholders from their communities, thinking about what the messages are about science education for their districts, thinking about how they want to measure whether or not their implementation is being successful, and then also collecting some baseline information about that. really encouraging and supporting folks to go back to the research that supports the standards and make sure that that's influencing what they're doing with their teams. And as we mentioned earlier, one of the best things about the standards development process we felt as a team was that we had lots of voices at the table. And so to continue that effort now at the district level, to be inviting business and industry, not just as funders, but as collaborators and moving forward with science education, outreach to parents is critical. Informing and working with informal science educators, so that's like the museums and the zoos and all those people, have them at the table. And don't do this as a district by yourself, but work together with other districts. Encouraging K-12 teaming. Our standards really build in their progression of learning from kindergarten through 12th grade. And if you're going to make that happen and roll out well, you have to have those teachers at the table for the conversation. And in that first year, we also, of course, want people to get familiar with the standards, but don't do this all at once. You need to figure out how to read the standards, think about how we move from standards to curriculum and from curriculum to lesson plans, and really engage around students using the science and engineering practices. So in that first year at KSDE, we did some direct professional learning support. So I went out to districts. I went to at least 15 districts in that first year, worked with their science teams, whatever sort of they requested me to go work with. We redeveloped the website online. At that point, we had by the end of that first year, I think we had about 800 to 1,000 users on the website, providing some opportunities to folks to interact. We work a lot with Kansas Association of Teachers of Science, Kansas Association of Conservation, this is acronym soup here, Kansas Association of Conservation and Environmental Education, Kansas State Science and Engineering Fair, Kansas Parent Teachers Association, Kansas Enrichment Network, and a whole variety of other organizations that provide services to teachers and students in districts. We also put out to districts an example implementation timeline and a workbook to sort of work through that. So this is what we think might look like to do this in about 3 years, and here's some ideas of how you can do it. We gave it to them in an Excel format so they could fit their needs locally. And we also laid out at that point in time a 3-year plan for how we were going to transition the assessment. So that was sort of our year 0, really, in terms of, because we adopted in the summer and didn't have a lot of time to sort of get that rolling. In this last year, we're seeing that change is happening. Districts are prioritizing what they need at the district and at the building level. They're building K-12 teams, and one of these are probably the 2 highest needs that I see out there when either myself or our trainers go out and work with districts. It's sort of this establishment of a K-12 team that's going to help make the transition and increasing the presence of science at the elementary level. And so thinking out ways to support that. Those have been sort of the 2 most common needs in districts. But again, the whole idea is using this implementation as a lever to move their system for science education forward. It's not about this standard or that standard. Obviously, you want to focus on maximizing student learning, but really it's an opportunity to move things forward. So in the last year, sort of again a year in review for this last year, we had a training of trainers. So increased my capacity. Instead of being the only one to go out, we now have 30 to 40 additional folks that can do that. Some of those were also people that were in large districts, so they weren't going to go out and do it somewhere else, but they're going to do their training within their own district, so we try to provide them with resources for that. At the summer academies, we reached several hundred teachers, again, providing some direct specific support. Both myself and our trainers have continued to go out to districts and try to fill their needs in terms of moving them forward. We also did a half-day training with curriculum leaders. So instead of the typical curriculum leader meeting, they had a half-day of professional learning with math and a half-day of professional learning with science, again, to build that capacity within them to be able to provide that learning for their teachers. Continue with the online support, just tipped over into the 1700s in terms of the folks that are online as registered users, so that's science educators in Kansas. And we provide not only resources on the website, but there's forums there to interact, and I send out sort of a bi-monthly update to those folks as well. We just recently opened up the Math Science Partnership Grant, which at one point was only for math, and KBOR had a sort of a companion grant that focused on science. Now our MSP, as they're called, our MSP grants are available for both math and science programs. We continue to collaborate with those Kansas science organizations we talked about further. We cut the science assessment for this current year in half. So we picked out the tested indicators that best aligned with our standards and reduced it to scope to that to really facilitate this transition, to keep giving folks information about what their students are learning and how they're learning it, but then also to make sure that they're freed up to make these big changes and what they might be thinking about in the classroom. And we have put together now a Kansas Science Assessment team who works on reviewing items that CETE is developing. And they have just started their work recently. So what's next? What are we going to look for here coming up soon? Of course, continuing to support classroom educators. We'll keep doing that district and region-specific stuff. The summer academies are being retooled and are called the Impact Institutes. We'll be a part of that. We're working with the Kansas Excellence in Math and Science Teaching Conference, which is sort of growing out of the Presidential Awards for Math and Science Teachers event. And we'll help provide some pieces from that. And hopefully within the next couple months, we'll be putting out some online professional development modules to reach to the folks that we can't get to in sort of a face-to-face conversation. Continuing to foster collaboration internally with all the other folks that we work with. We're also looking to roll out some parent guides to help support districts to reach parents, and continuing to work with all the partners that we've been working with throughout. So the bottom line here, and all of this stuff, we're trying to move in our goal to this, which is a part of the vision for science education, which I've presented before. Again, this is a wordle that is our teacher's vision for what we hope that we can get from science education in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Questions? Comments? Mrs. Campbell?
I always like to talk about money.
Yes, ma'am.
You showed, and I forgot, you receiving a grant. How much is it? Is it an annual renewal?
The MS Science Partnership Grant, is that you're referring to?
Mm-hmm.
That is an annual federal grant that comes, the money comes through us and we send it out to schools. They apply, there's an application process, and we put together a team of reviewers to review those grants, and then the monies go out to schools. It's in sort of a 3-year, they're only granted a year at a time, but it's sort of a 3-year process, and they can apply for up to $150,000 a year for those 3 years. So annually, we get in the ballpark. I'm not the coordinator, but I help Melissa Fast, who's the math person, a lot with that, in the ballpark of $1 million that we separate out and get and funnel out to districts.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy Bush?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up to that, those grants, do they go to schools, or is it schools and universities together?
It's schools and universities together. Okay. There's a structure of that's sort of set up through the federal monies. We have districts that are partnering with, has to be at least, there's a whole bunch of criteria in here, and I can send out some information and probably be better to the board for some links, but it's a partnership between the Institute of Higher Ed. Has to be at least one science education, or depending on if they're doing math or science or both, has to be at least one education faculty, one content area faculty, and then at least one high needs district. But usually it's one Institute of Higher Ed with several school districts that they're supporting.
Okay, thank you.
Couple of questions and comments. Sure. How's the implementation going, or I'd almost say pre-implementation here at the elementary level?
It really varies from district to district. I mean, I think that I've seen a lot of districts that are beginning to address that as part of their implementation plan. But we have a very wide range of time on task that happens at the elementary level, from basically nothing up to folks that are getting sort of daily science at the elementary level. So we're still in that place where it's across the full spectrum. And
this is a process of change over time. Yeah. You know, we're not forcing going in and saying, got to have this done by Tuesday. We're basically taking people where they are and moving them forward.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really, I mean, when we go out and work around implementation, it's very much about them analyzing what's working and not working with their own system and identifying goals that they can address as they move forward.
What efforts can you relate any in terms of business and industry? Do you have any heroes that are out there supporting this? You know,
We have a number of folks that have been a part of the process. In particular, I know, there are people that were on the Standards Development Committee to start with. Angela Krebs, who was at Kansas Bio and is now, I think this month is moving on from that position, but engaged the biotech community quite a bit around that. We had some engineers that were part of the development process. People like Marcel Harmon, who is here and presented, and Paul Woolley as well. Corporation-wise, at that sort of level, we haven't done much that way. We're starting to reach out and have those conversations with folks.
Well, you were talking about those extended areas like zoos and museums and such. There are professional associations within the science areas and engineering areas across our state that could be very influential and very supportive, these efforts. I'd encourage you to get in touch with them.
Great.
As well.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Matt, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Always good to see a review here. Thank you. Look forward to learning more about it in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. What's next here? We've had the legislative report this morning from Dale Dennis, so we're moving into consent, and we have an item that has been pulled from consent, item H, and that item has to do with authorizing the State Board of Education to review specifications for the State Board Attorney contract coming up. Brad, can you speak to that?
Yes, it will be moving. Oh,
I'm sorry, John.
I just asked for item H to be voted on separately.
Oh,
That was my
okay.
only question.
I'm sorry. I thank you very much for clarifying that. Okay. The request was that we vote on this separately, but I would ask if there's any questions or conversation that anyone has. Any comments or? We're voting on item H in the consent agenda, that be voted on individually. Do we vote on the whole consent agenda first and then on item H, or?
I would suggest do it all excluding H and then do H.
Okay, very good. So I would accept a motion to approve the consent agenda with item H withheld to be voted on separately. Kathy Bush moves.
I'll second.
And Sally Cobble seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. We have 9-0 with Carolyn Campbell out of the room at this time. No, you didn't vote. Steve, you got to look like you're putting your arm. Keep your arm. Those who are abstaining, those are against. 1. Okay. 7-1. Thank you. 8-1. And Carolyn out. That counting, those big numbers. Okay. I believe it passed, though. Steve, your arm looks like it's up all the time. Okay, item H. Do we have a motion to approve item H?
So moved.
Sally Cobble moves. Janet Wass seconds. Those in favor of item H, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is that right? We have 6. Let's do that again. We have Kathy, Sally, myself, and 3. So now we have 6, 4.
6-3.
And those opposed? 3 opposed, and Carolyn have 6-3.
The contract is up for renewal.
The no's were Steve Roberts. Can't get back in. Steve Roberts, John Bacon, and Ken Willard.
It's not Carolyn.
They went and got her.
Did they get her? Were you walking out?
Okay, so the motion passes. Okay, we are, I don't think we have any other business before us, so we're in recess until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
Don't forget about the breakfast.
Oh, the breakfast. How could I forget about the breakfast? 7:30. Yes, in room 560, 530? Just across from the cafeteria. Does it well. Okay. And on a personal note, thank you very much for being tolerant as I assume these duties and misname people and miscount Steve's votes. And, and Bill will be back with us again tomorrow.
The agenda, we're supposed to adjourn at 4:50.
Oh, good. You won't remember it.
More than an hour behind at one point.
Oh, actually, I thought I was about 6 minutes late.
Which,
Oh, there it goes. Okay, thank you very much. See you tomorrow morning at the SEAC Advisory Breakfast.